Hey guys, tonight we're time travelling to a place where most of your daily activities could kill you. Welcome to Tudor England. It's cold, it's filthy, it smells like wet hay and rotting fish, and somehow you were just born into it. Congrats, you probably won't survive this. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. It helps more than you know. Also drop a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is there. I love seeing how far this sleepy little history club reaches. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You open your eyes to the dim flicker of a fire dying in a stone hearth. The air inside the cottage is thick with smoke. There's no chimney. Just a hole in the thatched roof above you, and it's doing a terrible job. The room is a single cramped space made of timber and wattle and daub, which is a fancy phrase for sticks and mud, with gaps wide enough for the wind and rain to snake in. Your mother is asleep on a straw-stuffed mattress that's alive with fleas, and your father is already up, breaking ice from the water bucket. You're a peasant, which means you live in the same room with your whole family, your goat, maybe a chicken or two, and the ever-present smell of mildew and wet wool. If you make it past age 5, you're already doing better than half the kids in your village. Infant mortality is a savage little statistic, and no one keeps a baby name for too long, just in case. You're wrapped in layers of scratchy linen and wool, clothes that double as your pyjamas, playwear and funeral attires. The fabric's never been washed properly, because soap is expensive and water has to be carried from a stream that doubles as a toilet. You might be toddling already, trying to avoid rats and the sharp edges of a wooden stool your uncle made by accident. Or maybe you're just lying there, wide-eyed and wheezing through a chest cold that never quite leaves. Tudor lungs are a joke. They've been trained by years of open fires, moldy homes, and the occasional plague. Outside, your front yard is a patch of churned mud, trodden flat by pigs, kids, and carts. You think about going outside, but it's January, and your feet are bare. Your soul's cracked and caked in yesterday's dirt. You do it anyway, stepping over your uncle who's snoring against the doorframe and out into the damp grey world of your village. You pass another child, same age, equally filthy, also holding a turnip, and you nod solemnly. That's about as social as things get this early. Behind you, someone's shouting about a missing chicken, and someone else is coughing up what sounds like a lung. A dog limps past, one eye cloudy, dragging something suspiciously human-looking. But no one's alarmed? That's just a Tuesday. You learn fast in this world, faster than you should. Like how to tell which mushrooms kill you in an hour and which just make you see angels. How to dodge the local reeve, who'll beat you for walking on the wrong lord's field. Or how to warm your feet under a sleeping pig without waking it. Here's your first historical fact of the night. The average Tudor child might have only owned one pair of shoes in their entire life. Most of the time barefoot was the norm. In winter, on frozen ground, with open sores, one wrong step and hello, infection. Hope your parents already named the next baby. And here's something a little more fringe for your sleepy brain to chew on. There were parents who literally didn't name their children until they were 5 or 6 years old. It wasn't official policy or anything, but it was common sense. Why get attached to someone who might not make it past their first plague season? Now, scholars do debate just how brutal Tudor childhood really was. There's one camp that says people just didn't feel emotions the way we do now, that losing a baby didn't hit them as hard really as it was so common. Another camp insists grief was just as raw, just as personal, but people had fewer ways to express it. No diaries, no therapy, no social media posts saying, "Fly high, little Thomas." Just a quiet moment maybe, and then back to work in the fields. Your job for now is to stay alive, not thrive, just survive. You're not dreaming of being a knight or a courtier. You're dreaming of hot porridge and maybe, just maybe, not getting ringworm again this month. By now the village is waking up. Smoke is rising from other roof holes, and the familiar stench of morning chamber pots being dumped into the street starts wafting past. Someone's already arguing with the baker, and someone else is beating laundry on a rock, muttering curses in a thick dialect that's only half English. You help your mother with the fire. That means blowing on damp wood until your lips go numb. Your eyes sting from the smoke. No one's invented the concept of a safe indoor air index yet. The house fills up with smoke so thick, It coats the back of your throat and settles in your lungs like a second pair of soggy pyjamas. You cough, spit and smile. It's a new day in Tudor England. You're 5 years old, you've got a pulse, and for now, that's enough. You step outside finally, and your feet disappear into the cold mud like they belong there. You'd think the sun might help warm things up a little, but it's more of a suggestion than a source of heat. A dull, cloudy smear in the sky that does nothing to dry the ground or lift your mood. The village path is ankle deep in sludge, and it squelches with every step. You're careful not to fall face first into it like your cousin did last week. He came up gagging with something suspiciously shiny in his mouth. No one talks about it. Around you the air smells like boiled cabbage, animal waste and smoke. All blended into one powerful Tudor cologne. You wrinkle your nose, which is already running from the cold, and try to breathe through your mouth. Not that it helps, because someone just dumped their chamber pot from the second floor of a timber-framed house, and it hits the ground beside you with a splash you feel in your soul. Luckily, you've got decent reflexes, probably because dodging airborne waste is a key survival skill here. This is how it works. Homes don't have plumbing. The richer houses have a hole in the floor and maybe a bucket underneath. But most folks just collect their business in pots overnight and hurl it into the street in the morning, sometimes with a shout of Gardez-l'eau if they're feeling fancy. That's French for watch the water, which is deeply optimistic given that what's falling is more of a chunky broth. You keep moving, hopping from dryish stone to straw-stuffed corner, avoiding puddles with suspicious oil-slick rainbows floating on top. A pig wanders past, unconcerned. They're the real rulers of Tudor waste management. They eat anything, and you mean anything. Bones, trash, dead rats, even smaller pigs. And no one complains, because if a pig dies, that's dinner for the week. Now here's a juicy historical fact. Most Tudor villages didn't have anything remotely resembling a sewer system. In London, they had cesspits, deep holes under or near the house that stored waste until someone literally climbed in to shovel it out. These folks were called gong farmers, and they worked mostly at night because the smell during the day was enough to peel paint off walls. If you're wondering about long-term health risks, yes, it did kill them early, but the pay was weirdly good, which is maybe the most Tudor sentence ever. Speaking of strange jobs, here's your quirky fringe fact. In certain towns, local councils tried to fine people for dumping waste out windows, but since everyone did it, the laws basically turned into a game of how fast can you pour and duck. Enforcement was spotty at best. Unless you hit a nobleman's cloak, then you were probably losing a hand. The scholars do debate, though, how widespread the filth actually was. Some say it wasn't that much worse than any other medieval culture, that people understood the need for cleanliness. Even if their version of clean wouldn't pass a modern inspection, others argue the stench, pollution, and general disregard for sanitation were worse in Tudor England than almost anywhere else in Europe at the time. But honestly, when you're dodging human waste while trying to walk to the well, it's kind of a moot point. You're heading toward that well now, by the way, with a wooden pail bouncing against your hip. It's not your job, not yet, but your sister's sick and your mother's busy crushing lice eggs between her thumbnails, so it falls to you. Water is life, and life here has to be carried one sloshy trip at a time. You pass other villagers on the way, one old man muttering prayers and coughing into a rag that's gone stiff with dried mucus. A woman bent double under a load of firewood. A teen shouting at a goose that's stolen his breakfast crust. You keep your head down. You're 5, but you know better than to make eye contact. People are tired, angry, always one bad day from taking it out on someone smaller than them. The well is a gathering point, the social media of its day, except everyone smells like they've been buried for a week. A few women trade gossip about someone who disappeared last night. Another warns about wolves spotted near the edge of the forest. You edge in between 2 older kids and drop your bucket with a loud thud. The rope creaks, the bucket sinks, and you wait. The water will be murky, possibly with a hint of human runoff, but it's what you've got. Another kid beside you snorts. Don't drink the top, that's where the frog was floating yesterday. You nod solemnly. Good tip. By the time you haul your pail back home, your arms feel like wet string and your sleeves are soaked to the elbows. Your little fingers are pink and stinging. The door creaks as you push inside and a rush of warm, smoky air hits your face. It doesn't smell better in here, just different. Your sister is still coughing in the corner. Your father's sharpening a blade that he'll probably use later to skin a rabbit or whittle a spoon. Could go either way. Your mother takes the water without a word, pours some into a battered pot and sets it over the fire. Maybe you'll have pottage tonight. Basically water, some herbs, and anything vaguely edible tossed in. Could be onion, could be squirrel. You try not to think too hard about it. It's not even noon, but your clothes are wet, your stomach's empty, and your ears are ringing from the cold. You lie down on the straw mattress again, pulling a scratchy wool blanket over your head. You close your eyes and listen to the sounds of Tudor life all around you. Coughing, muttering, the occasional fart, and the comforting snuffle of the family pig. You've survived another morning in Tudor England. Barely. You wake up to the sound of chewing. Loud, wet chewing. It's the pig again. Somehow it's gotten into a basket of what your mother was generously calling bread. You lift the corner of the blanket and peek. Yep, it's gone. Not just chewed, but devoured, crumbs smeared across the pig's snout like some sad little crime scene. And just like that, breakfast is cancelled. You sigh, not because you expected a feast, but because hunger is starting to pinch a little harder now. Your stomach grumbles, rude and dramatic, echoing in the quiet of the smoky room. Your mother notices and tosses you something small and dry. It's a crust, probably from yesterday or maybe the day before. You don't ask, you just gnaw on it, even though it tastes like dust and the middle might be blue-green with something fuzzy. If you scrape it off with your teeth and squint, it almost passes for flavour. Welcome to the Tudor breakfast experience. If you're rich, maybe you're waking up to eggs, bacon, honey, and sweet rolls, but you're not rich. You're poor, rural, and 5. Your bread was baked with flour that might have been mixed with sawdust or crushed peas. Your water is full of whatever the neighbours dumped in upstream, and your mealtime table is a wobbly plank propped on 2 barrels with one-legged stools for chairs. Luxury. Let's pause for a historical fact while you chew. During the Tudor era, bread was classified by colour and cost. The poor ate the darkest, coarsest bread, often made with rye, barley, or even beans and oats, while the rich flaunted their status with fine white loaves. The irony? The white stuff was stripped of most of its nutrition. But hey, it looked good in banquets and portraits. But here's where it gets funky. Fringe fact funky. You ever heard of ergot? It's a mould that grows on rye, especially when the grain's been stored improperly in damp, shady granaries, which is practically all of them. Consuming bread laced with ergot could cause hallucinations, convulsions, gangrene, and death. It's been theorised that some historical bewitching episodes, like those in Salem, were actually ergot poisoning. So yes, that weird buzzing in your ears might be the mould kicking in, not a fairy curse. The scholars are still chewing on this one, no pun intended. Some argue ergot outbreaks were rare and mostly limited to colder, wetter regions of Europe. Others believe it was widespread and completely unrecognised at the time, contributing to everything from sudden mass illnesses to dancing manias. Either way, in your case, if you start seeing angels in the rafters later, we'll know why. You finish the crust, well, most of it. The last bite is too hard and tastes faintly of rat nest, so you chuck it behind a beam and pretend you ate it. Your pig immediately snorts and wanders over to investigate. The pig, by the way, is basically family. You won't name it, of course, because eventually it'll be slaughtered and salted for winter. But for now, it's Ormia, security and a garbage disposal in one. Your mother's already moved on to lunch prep, which mostly involves boiling yesterday's pottage and praying it hasn't gone sour. You decide to get out of her way and step outside again, back into the sticky, shoe-sucking mud of the village. The air has warmed a little, and the scent of manure has really opened up now, like a fine wine with overtones of despair. You pass the baker's hut, and your mouth waters as you catch a whiff of real bread. White, fluffy, blessedly not mouldy. But that's not for you. That's for someone whose father owns land or gets to wear sleeves with buttons. You keep walking. A few boys are chasing each other with sticks that double as swords and fishing poles, and occasionally disciplinary tools when an adult gets annoyed. You join in half-heartedly, I suppose, but the energy isn't there. Hunger is a quiet thief that steals your spark. The older boys start talking about eel traps and where to find the biggest frogs. You listen, filing it away. Protein is rare, and sometimes dinner is whatever you can grab near the stream and hide in your tunic long enough to cook when no one's watching. Your stomach growls again. You think about last week, when your cousin tried to roast a squirrel he caught. He forgot to gut it, and the entire thing exploded in the fire like a greasy hand grenade. He cried, mostly from hunger, and then tried to eat the tail out of sheer determination. No one judged him. Here's another thought for your dozing brain. Most peasants didn't eat much meat. It wasn't that they didn't want to, it was just expensive, heavily taxed, and often forbidden by the landowners who reserved hunting rights for themselves. Killing a deer could get you hanged. Killing a rabbit might just cost you a finger. So people relied on grains, root vegetables, and whatever they could scrape together from nature without being seen. But when meat did come around, it was an event. A pig slaughter, a fish catch, or a rare bird that fell out of a tree. You didn't ask questions. You plucked, cooked, and devoured. Inside your house, the pottage is bubbling again. It's the same thing every day. Maybe a turnip this time, or a scrap of salted meat from last month. You pretend to be excited, because your mother's watching you with that look that says, "I worked hard to keep us alive today." And she did. You sit on your stool, not because you're ready to eat, but because it's the only warm spot in the house that doesn't smell like pig feet or mildew. Your father breaks off chunks of the new bread loaf, harder than the crust you had earlier, but fresh enough to not glow in the dark. You dip a piece into the pottage, let it soak, then gnaw. It's hot at least, hot enough to fool your stomach into thinking it's full. The pig wanders by again, sniffing your ankle. You nudge it gently with your foot and it flops down beside you like a dog. For a moment the fire crackles, the steam rises, and your stomach stops complaining. This is what passes for a peaceful meal. No shouting, no spilled chamber pot, just warm slop and quiet chewing. And in Tudor England, that's basically fine dining. The fire's burned down to a red glow by the time you step outside again, stomach slightly less hollow than it was an hour ago. The pig is napping in the doorway, its sides rising and falling in a rhythm that might lull you into a nap if it weren't for the sharp scent of nearby dung. You step over it and brace yourself for the wind. It's not strong, but it's the kind that carries splinters of cold straight through your thin wool shirt. You wrap your arms around yourself and press forward. Your feet are bare again, not by choice. Your only pair of shoes are soaked through, and your mother's placed them near the hearth to dry, which means they'll probably just steam until they rot. But that's the way it is. Footwear is optional for a peasant's, and by optional, we mean unattainable. You make your way toward the edge of the village, where a path runs past the blacksmith's lean-to and the tanner's pit. You don't want to linger here. The tanner's work is necessary but awful. The hides soaking in a stew of urine and lime give off a stink so pungent it coats your tongue. Still, there's something weirdly comforting about its familiarity. That nose-burning, eye-watering assault on the senses has been a part of your life since before you could walk. You hold your breath and move on. A girl from another family passes you with a bucket sloshing over the edge, and you offer a quick nod. She's your age or maybe older. It's hard to tell when most people are already hunched by their teens. Her tunic is patched, her fingers are raw, but she gives you a grin that says, "We're still here." And that's something. You reach the common field where older kids and tired adults are already digging and raking at the soil, trying to get it ready for planting. You're too small to be helpful, but you hang around anyway. You like the feeling of purpose that hangs in the air, even if that purpose is mostly poke the dirt and hope it feeds us later. Here's something the textbooks like to skip over. Child labour wasn't just a reality in Tudor England, it was the expectation. You started working as soon as you could hold something without dropping it. By 7 or 8, you'd be considered a functional member of the household economy. And if you were still underfoot by 10, people started whispering. What's wrong with him? Is he slow? Sickly? Lazy? Right now you're watching a boy a few years older than you push a wooden plough while his father guides the blade behind him. The boy's sweating, red-faced, with blisters already rising on his hands. No one tells him to stop. No one offers to take over. Everyone's got their own plot to worry about. You glance down at your own fingers. You've already got one nail turning black from a misjudged hammer swing last week. It'll fall off soon. No big deal. Let's slide in a historical fact while you kick at a root. Tudor children didn't have a childhood in the modern sense. The moment you could walk, you were sent to fetch, carry, clean or watch smaller siblings. Wealthy kids were schooled, poor kids were trained. The phrase seen and not heard wasn't just a rule, it was survival. Speak too much and you'd catch a backhand. Slack off and you'd miss the only decent meal of the day. Here's your weird fact to stir in like a lumpy stew. In wealthier households, it was common for children to be sent away around age 7 to serve as apprentices or live-in servants in other homes. This wasn't just for work, it was also a bizarre form of social training. You'd learn how to behave, how to serve, and how not to die of boredom while folding linens or turning a spit for 16 hours. Some historians even compare it to a soft boot camp for future adults, but not everyone agrees on how grim it really was. Some scholars argue that Tudor parents were deeply affectionate and involved, especially in lower-class families where survival required teamwork. Others suggest parents were distant, even cold, raising children more like tools than companions. The truth, as always, is probably somewhere in the middle bit. You love your kids, sure, but if they die of flux before harvest, you've got to keep moving. Speaking of moving, your father appears, his shadow stretching long across the turned soil. He waves you over, not urgently but firmly. He's been watching, he always is. You jog up, careful not to slip in the muck, and he places a small wooden rake in your hands. "Clear the stones," he grunts. And that's that. No smile, no thanks, just the task. You kneel and start digging, fingers numb, legs soaked through. The rake is dull and chipped, more of a suggestion of a tool than a real one, but you use it anyway. Your job isn't to complain, your job is to not be in the way. Every now and then your mother appears with a jug of weak ale and passes it around. No one drinks water unless they have to. It's too risky, at least ale's been boiled. You take a sip and cough. It tastes like sour bread and metal, but it goes down, barely. Around you the fields stretch toward the grey horizon. This land doesn't belong to your family. It belongs to a landlord who probably lives in a big stone manor with a vaulted ceiling and enough firewood to build a second house. You get to farm this dirt for him, and in return he lets you live on it. You give him crops, livestock, labour, sometimes even your best child if he needs a servant. You wonder what it must be like to live like that. To wake up in a bed with sheets, to have shoes that match, to eat breakfast that didn't come out of a muddy root cellar. But then you remember, you'd have to wear those itchy ruffled collars, and suddenly it doesn't seem worth it. The sun begins to dip, and with it the chill returns. You gather the stones in a little pile and sit back on your heels. Your hands are swollen, your knees are caked in earth. But the work is done, for now. Your father gives you a short nod, a rare victory. You pocket the moment like a pebble and carry it home. By the time you make it back to your house, the sky has deepened into that burning bluish grey that signals another cold night. You don't need to check the fire. You can already see the glow flickering against the walls through the open doorway, and you can smell the smoke curling out the roof. You pause just before stepping inside and shake the mud from your toes against the frame. Not that it helps. The dirt is already part of the floor by now. The house is made of it, lived in it, and slowly dissolving back into it. Inside, your little sister is crying, again. She's maybe 2 and she's sick. Nothing specific, just a fever that lingers and a cough that rattles like old kindling. You're used to the sound. So is your mother, who sits beside her, holding a damp cloth to the girl's head and humming something low, almost tuneless. You think it's meant to be soothing, but your sister doesn't seem convinced. Her cheeks are flushed, her eyes watery, and the snot trail from her nose could serve as a village weather gauge. Thicker today, which means it's going to freeze tonight. Your father's cleaning something in a wooden bowl by the fire. A rabbit, maybe. It's hard to tell. Could just as easily be a large rat. Either way, it's dinner. You sit down by the hearth and let the warmth bake into your hands. It stings at first, like your fingers forgot what hot means, but after a few minutes the sensation returns. You don't talk much. No one really does. There's nothing new to say. The day's work is done, food's being cooked, the sick child hasn't died, and the roof didn't cave in. That counts as a win. The rest, just waiting. Let's sprinkle in a historical fact before you fall asleep on the floor. Formal education during the Tudor era was mostly reserved for boys from wealthier families. Grammar schools, often run by the church, taught Latin, religious texts, and moral instruction. And by moral instruction we mean rote memorization and frequent beatings. For everyone else, especially girls, education was at home, if it happened at all. You might learn to count to 10, maybe write your name, but that's it. And if you're a girl, congrats. Your curriculum is spinning, sewing, and making sure you don't disgrace the family before your arranged marriage. Literacy, optional, virginity, mandatory. Still, there's a fringe fact that adds some texture. There are records of girls and women who secretly taught themselves to read using religious texts or smuggled scraps of books. Some even learned to write, which was almost scandalous in its independence. In rare cases, these women kept diaries, secret little time capsules written in the margins of prayer books or the backs of household accounts. If those were found, they could be confiscated or burned. Not because the content was dangerous, but because the very act of a poor or female person writing was. There's scholarly disagreement, of course. Some believe literacy was more common among the lower classes than we give credit for, especially in cities. Others argue it was strictly limited to the elite, and that any peasant who could read was the exception, not the rule. Either way, you're not spending your evening with a book. You're watching a pot boil and wondering if there's enough meat in it to flavour the broth. Dinner is served with little ceremony. Your father ladles out the stew, thin as always, but hot and with something solid at the bottom, likely a chunk of root vegetable, maybe parsnip or swede. You eat with your fingers, scooping it into your mouth and blowing the steam off each bite. It burns your tongue a little, but you don't care. It's better than the aching hollowness from earlier. Even your sister manages a few swallows before she drifts back into a sweaty, restless sleep. When the meal's done, your mother collects the bowls, wipes them with a bit of stale bread, and leaves them by the door. Washing can wait. Water is precious and your bucket's nearly empty again. Besides, the fire's more important now. You stretch out on the packed earth beside the hearth, using your arm as a pillow. The pig is already there, snoring, and you nudge it just enough to claim a warm spot against its side. It grunts but doesn't move. That's the kind of relationship you've built. Grudging tolerance for the sake of survival. The room settles into silence. Outside an owl hoots, then silence again. In the far distance you think you hear someone shouting, maybe drunk or angry or both, but the sound fades quickly. Most people are asleep by now. Sleep is the only luxury you can afford in abundance. The fire crackles softly. Shadows dance on the walls, flickering across wooden beams and smoke-stained rafters. Your mother lies on the other side of the room, wrapped in layers of old wool. Your father's already snoring. You can't tell if it's peaceful or just exhaustion. Your mind wanders the way it always does when your belly is full and the world has gone quiet. You think about things you can't name yet. About why the stars look so close. About how long winter will last. About whether your sister will still be breathing in the morning. You don't have words for fear or grief or hope. Just feelings that move through you like smoke from the fire. Thick, constant, impossible to escape. You wonder, dimly, what tomorrow will bring. More work. More hunger. Maybe a visit from the parish priest, or a merchant with cloth to sell. Maybe someone will die. Maybe someone will marry. It's all the same in the end. But for now, you're warm. You're still here, and in Tudor England, that's enough to call the day a success. Morning doesn't so much arrive as it creeps in under the door and up through the cracks in the floor, a grey damp presence that makes everything feel colder than it should. There's no sun, just a gradual lightening of the foggy sky, and the sound of someone outside throwing up. It might be old Margaret from 2 cottages down. Might be your neighbour's boy again, the one who eats mushrooms with reckless confidence. Either way, it's your Tudor alarm clock, and you're awake. You stretch, or at least try to, but the stiffness in your limbs says no. Sleeping on packed earth wrapped around a snoring pig is not particularly ergonomic. Your left leg has gone numb. Your right hand is curled under your face and tingling. You sit up slowly, blinking against the smoke that still hangs in the air from last night's fire. It never really clears. It just settles into your hair, your clothes, your lungs. You breathe it in like it's part of your diet. There's no time for dawdling. Your mother's already moving, silently poking at the fire, stirring up coals, setting a dented pot on the iron hook. It'll be a weak porridge this morning. Just oats, if you're lucky. If not, ground peas and yesterday's water. You're tasked with fetching kindling today. Not glamorous work, but it beats chasing geese or helping your father wrestle a sheep into compliance. You slip into your now dry shoes, still hard, still stinking faintly of ash and mildew, and hade outside. The chill bites immediately and rudely straight through your clothes. You hug yourself and jog toward the edge of the village. The woods are a little ways off, past the crumbling stone wall that marks the end of your lord's land and the beginning of technically forbidden, but nobody's is looking. You're not supposed to take wood from there. It's considered poaching, and the punishment ranges from a fine you can't pay to a beating you'll definitely remember. But like most villagers, you've developed a knack for silent theft. A twig here, a fallen branch there, nothing big enough to notice, nothing worth hanging for. On the way, you pass the manor steward on horseback. You bow your head, avoiding eye contact, and he doesn't even glance in your direction. His boots are polished, his cloak fur-lined. You wonder briefly how he smells. Probably like soap. Maybe rosemary, definitely not like goat and boiled linen. Historical sidebar for your still-waking brain. In Tudor England, forests were fiercely protected. The royal forests, in particular, were off limits to anyone without express permission. You could be fined or mutilated for gathering firewood, especially if it looked like you chopped it yourself. Fallen wood was the safest bet, but even then it was a gamble. The forest belonged to someone else. You just existed around it. Now for your quirky fringe fact. Some towns employed woodmongers, people licensed to gather and sell firewood to the poor. The catch? It was often the same wood you could have picked up yourself if the laws weren't so tightly wound. So people did it anyway, usually at dawn or under cover of fog, pockets stuffed with kindling, hoping not to be noticed. It was a quiet rebellion, a twig thief's revolution. Scholars argue whether these harsh land use laws were necessary to protect resources, or just another tool to keep the poor desperate and dependent. One camp insists they were a form of primitive environmental policy. Don't strip the land bare, or no one eats. The other camp says, sure, but maybe don't beat a child for picking up a stick. You reach the edge of the woods and slow down, slipping between two mossy trunks. The trees are bare now, fingers clawing at the sky. Your breath clouds in front of your face. You scan the ground. There, some fallen branches, a few bits of bark dry enough to burn if you stack them close to the fire first. You gather what you can, stuffing pieces into your arms, using your chin to balance the load. It's a clumsy, awkward bundle. You look like a hedge with legs. You head back, careful to avoid the deeper mud pits and the rotting badger carcass someone's left on the path as a warning, or maybe a gift, depending on who's walking by. A crow stares at you from a low branch, feathers puffed against the cold. You stare back. You're not sure who looks worse. Back home, your mother takes the kindling with a quiet nod, tosses a few pieces into the fire, and stirs the porridge. You sit down near the hearth again, letting your hands hover above the flames. The pig's still snoring. You wish you could switch places. Breakfast is thin, barely food, but warm. You swallow each mouthful slowly, trying to trick your body into thinking you're satisfied. You're not. Hunger is a familiar companion now, a quiet pressure, always there, humming in the background of every thought. After you eat, you take a seat near the wall where the light hits just right, and scratch figures into the dirt with a stick. You're trying to copy the letters you saw once in a church window. You don't know what they mean, but they felt powerful, sacred somehow. Your father sees you and snorts. Waste of time, he mutters. Won't feed you. Won't fix a roof. He's not wrong, but something inside you rebels anyway. The idea of knowing things others don't, that maybe learning could be more than survival, is too delicious to ignore. Your cousin shows up around midday, breathless and muddy, claiming he's seen a travelling friar setting up outside the churchyard. That means stories, and maybe a puppet show if the friar's feeling theatrical. You drop your stick and follow him, running through the village, dodging geese and shouting apologies to an old woman you nearly knock over. The friar's real. Brown robe, balding head, cart full of scrolls and trinkets. He's standing on a crate delivering a lesson about sin and salvation, but with enough humour and hand gestures to keep the kids interested. You hang on every word, not because you fully understand it, but because it's different. A voice from somewhere else, a slice of the outside world. You laugh when everyone laughs. You gasp when he pulls out a small carved figure of St. Peter, and claims it once glowed in the dark. It didn't. You sit in the dirt and forget your empty stomach for a while. This is school. Church and charm and second-hand knowledge. And if you're lucky, he'll tell the story of the boy who outran the devil using only a bell and a loaf of blessed bread. He does. You grin the whole time. That night, back in your smoky little cottage, you fall asleep with the story still bouncing around your head, warm and comforting like a second blanket. You wake up chewing on a dream. Not literally, but close. It was a good one this time, something about roasted goose, honey cakes, and maybe a feather bed somewhere in a stone house with windows that actually close. You can't quite remember now, just the feeling. Warmth, fullness, softness. Everything your real life doesn't have. You roll over onto the floor, which greets you with its usual cold indifference. The fire's gone out again, and the pig is nowhere to be seen. Probably outside, rooting through the ash pile for burnt scraps. Your mother's already up, brushing lint off a threadbare dress and tucking her hair under a linen coif that's seen better decades. She gives you the look, the one that says, "Get up, life's not going to survive itself." You nod and pull yourself upright. There's a bucket of water by the door, and you splash your face with a handful so cold it slaps you awake harder than any schoolmaster could. Today's a market day. Not for your family, you don't have coin or goods worth selling, but for the village. which means the road will be alive with strangers, carts, chickens, and probably someone playing a pipe badly near the well. It also means a chance to see things you'd never afford, but maybe steal a glance at. Silks, oranges, salt-cured fish from the coast. You pull on your rough tunic and tie it at the waist with a fraying cord, already planning how close you can get without getting chased off. As you step out into the village lane, you notice something. A smell. Not manure, not smoke, not even the usual waft of pig-related tragedy. No, this is sweet, sharp, rich. You follow it with your nose until it leads you to the baker's hut, where a noble servant is standing, buying several golden rolls of something that might be sweetbread. Your mouth waters immediately, and then you see the man she's buying for. He's tall, with the kind of coat that screams, "I own 3 buildings and you." His teeth, when he smiles at the baker's daughter, are black. Not stained, not dirty, black, like soot polished to a shine. You blink, confused. Is he sick? Cursed? Possessed by sugar dimuns? Let's pause for your historical fact before the jealousy kicks in. In Tudor England, black teeth weren't necessarily a sign of poor hygiene. Among the wealthy, they were actually a fashion statement. You heard that right. Sugar was so rare, so expensive that if your teeth rotted from too much of it, that meant you were rich enough to afford loads of it. Black teeth became something to be proud of, proof that you were living the sweet life literally and figuratively. For poor folks like you, though, sugar's a fantasy, a merchant's treat. You might taste it once or twice a year, hidden in a stolen candied almond, at a feast or scraped from the bottom of a forgotten pie tin. Otherwise it's all porridge, onions, and the occasional boiled root masquerading as food. Now for your quirky fact of the day. Some people were so desperate to appear wealthy that they painted their teeth black. Yes, on purpose, with soot, charcoal, or powdered herbs mixed into a sticky paste. This wasn't just vanity, it was a survival strategy, a way to fake status, to avoid suspicion, or to impress someone slightly higher up the peasant ladder. You never know when pretending to be better fed might get you an invitation, or at least a safer place at the feast. Of course, scholars are still arguing about whether this tooth painting was common or just anecdotal. Some think it was a real trend in the Elizabethan court, spread among ambitious courtiers. Others suggest it was more likely exaggerated by the foreign visitors who didn't understand the local obsession with dental decay. Either way, black teeth weren't the red flag you'd assume. They were the Tudor equivalent of a luxury car, just more painful. Back in the lane, you watch as the nobleman bites into the roll and talks loudly about court life. You can't hear every word, but you catch names: Walsingham, Norfolk, the Queen's astrologer, and it all sounds impossibly far away. You shift your weight, pretending not to listen, while secretly memorising every crumb of gossip. These stories might not feed you, but they do fill you in other ways. The baker's daughter catches you staring. She doesn't scowl, she just lifts a brow, as if to say, don't even think about it. You give her your most innocent smile, which probably still makes you look like a starving street imp, and wander off before someone asks what you're doing. You end up at the market square, such as it is, a flattened patch of mud with a few stalls, some cloth stretched over wooden poles, and a cluster of chickens that belong to no one and everyone. A man is selling ribbons, another is sharpening knives. And someone, of course, is already shouting about miracle herbs that will restore virility, which is a word you only sort of understand. You circle the square, hands in your pockets, not because you're cold, but because you've been told more than once that visible hands make merchants nervous. Keep your thieving fingers out of sight, your cousin once said, and your eyes up. It's the poor boy's version of politeness. You do spot something strange today, though. A woman in fine dress, way too fine for your village, carrying a covered basket and stopping at nearly every stall. She's tall, with a long neck and gloves made from real leather. Not the cracked, stiff kind, but the kind that actually bends with her fingers. You don't recognise her, which means she's from outside, maybe visiting the manor, maybe lost, maybe looking for something. Your curiosity almost gets the better of you until your stomach reminds you it's market day, and market day means samples. You sidle over to the pickle man and wait until he's distracted by a customer, then quickly pinch a bit of sour turnip from the corner of the tray. It burns your tongue and puckers your throat, but it's food. Sort of. You do the same at the herb woman's stall, pretending to sneeze while pocketing a tiny piece of candied ginger. She sees you, of course, but says nothing. She probably recognises the look on your face. It's not greed, it's survival. By midday, the market is thinning out. The nobleman has moved on, his servant trailing behind with the sweetbread. The ribbon man is packing up. Someone's arguing about the price of sheep. You head home, chewing on your stolen ginger. savouring the heat in your mouth like it's treasure. At the cottage, the air is thick with the smell of boiled onion. Lunch is ready, if you can call it that. Your sister's asleep finally, cheeks still too red. Your mother nods at your entrance. You sit down, ignoring the grumble in your stomach for just a moment longer, because the warmth from the stolen ginger is still glowing in your chest. Today, you tasted sweetness. Just a scrap. Just enough to remember it's real. It hits fast. You're playing outside, balancing on the edge of the frozen watering trough, when the first scream tears through the village. Not a playful shriek, not someone scolding a goat. A real raw sound, the kind that silences birds and turns heads. You stop moving, everyone does. Even the pigs go still, as if the world just shifted slightly sideways. Then the second scream comes, louder, and this one ends in a choked gurgle that raises the hairs on your neck. You hop off the trough and run toward the sound because you're a child, and curiosity hasn't been stomped out of you yet. People are gathering in the muddy lane, some back away quickly. Others cross themselves and mutter prayers. You push through a knot of neighbours and see the source. It's old Thomas. Or it was. He's lying face down in the mud outside his hut, convulsing. His shirt is soaked with sweat and something darker, and there's foam bubbling from the corner of his mouth. One leg kicks violently. Then nothing. Silence again. No one moves. Your mother's voice cuts through the fog in your brain. Sweating sickness. That's all she says. 2 words, sharp as a blade. Your blood goes cold. Let's pause for the historical fact you didn't ask for but probably need right now. Sweating sickness, or the English sweat, was one of the most terrifying illnesses of the Tudor period. It struck without warning and killed within hours. Symptoms began suddenly. Headache, chills, body aches, followed by intense sweating, delirium, and often death. It showed up in waves throughout the late 15th and early 16th centuries and vanished just as mysteriously. No one's entirely sure what caused it. Some say it was a hantavirus, others think it was a severe form of influenza. Whatever it was fast, brutal, and deeply democratic. It killed peasants and the nobles alike. Now for your daily dose of weirdness. People were so terrified of catching the sweat that they would literally flee their homes at the first hint of a case, sometimes abandoning children, spouses, and all worldly belongings. Entire streets would empty overnight. There are records of towns where the disease arrived in the morning and left a trail of corpses by sundown. As for the scholarly debate, well, it's ongoing. Some historians argue that the sweat wasn't a disease at all, but a combination of factors, poor sanitation, heat, stress, even bad food, that created the illusion of a new illness. Others insisted it was a real virus, a lethal strain that simply mutated out of existence. The most haunting part? It never returned outside England. Foreign physicians were baffled. Only your cursed island, one French doctor reportedly said, breeds death that smells like and fire. Back in the village, no one dares to touch old Thomas. A woman screams again, his wife. She's dragged away before she can reach the body. Already, people are backing up, whispering, moving toward their homes with wide eyes and fast hands. Your mother grabs your shoulder and spins you around so fast you nearly fall. Home! Now! No arguments, no explanations. Inside, she bolts the door and stuffs rags into the cracks between the boards. Your father smashes the window shutters closed. The room goes dim and smells instantly of fear and sour smoke. You huddle near the hearth with your little sister, who doesn't understand what's happening. She just coughs, a long, wheezing cough that your mother pretends not to hear. You whisper, "Is she sick?" But your mother's too busy muttering prayers under her breath, knuckles white on the rosary beads. Your father pours ale over his hands like it's holy water. He doesn't even flinch when it seeps into his knuckle wounds. The pig presses itself into the corner like it knows it's not welcome anymore. The hours pass in silence. You hear someone running outside, then another scream, then a knock on the door. Just one, then silence. Your family doesn't move. You wait until the sun sinks, until the fire is little more than embers, till your legs cramp and your stomach clenches with hunger. No one eats. No one breathes too loudly. You don't know what time it is when your father finally speaks. It'll pass. It always does. But the words sound hollow, like he's trying to convince the room more than himself. The next day no one leaves. Not just your family. No one in the village. The lane is empty. The market square is abandoned. Smoke curls from a few chimneys, but most houses are shuttered tight. Silent as tombs. Even the dogs are quiet. The chickens, the goats. They're still alive, but barely. No one's feeding them. Everyone is waiting, listening. Your mother tells you not to talk near the fire. The smoke might carry sickness, she says. Your father smirks, but doesn't argue. There's no reason to risk it. Not now. Here's another little horror tucked into Tudor life. No one really understands disease yet. Germ theory is still centuries away. Theories range from bad air to God's punishment to you didn't pray hard enough. Some people smear their bodies with vinegar. Others hang herbs around their necks. A few even bleed themselves, hoping the sickness will leave with the blood. You stay inside for 3 days. On the second day you hear someone being buried just down the lane. They do it fast. No priest, no prayers. Just a shovel and a blanket. You don't ask who, you don't want to know. By the 4th day your mother peeks outside carefully, slowly. The air doesn't look different, but it feels different. Still heavy but less charged. No new screams, no fresh bodies. Maybe it's over. The sweat has passed through like a storm, sudden, violent and gone. No goodbyes, no explanations. You survived, again, just like last winter's fever, and the summer when the bread turned green, and the time the well filled with frogs. You're still here. And in Tudor England, that's practically a miracle. That night you sleep harder than you have in days. Your mother finally eats. Your father finally swears out loud again, which is somehow reassuring. And your sister? She still coughs. But it's quieter now. Less like a warning, more like a tired echo. No one says the word safety, no one says next time, but you all feel it sitting there, silent in the rafters like the shadow of something that hasn't left yet. The village smells different now, not cleaner, just emptier. The kind of quiet that creeps into your bones. You walk past shuttered homes with no smoke curling from their chimneys and no sounds coming from behind the walls. A week ago this lane was full of voices, grumbling, bickering, laughing, yelling at animals. But now, you can hear your own footsteps squelching in the mud. The sweating sickness didn't take everyone, but it took enough. You count at least 4 cottages that haven't reopened their doors. No one talks about it. No one has to. Your mother tells you to fetch water like everything's normal. So you tie your cloak, an old one that smells like damp wool and boiled onions, and trudge off with the wooden bucket bouncing against your knee. At the well, 2 other children are already there. You don't talk. Just nod in that quiet shared understanding. We're still here. You too? Good. Then you each take your turn at the rope, lowering the pail into the cold, dark hole, and pretending not to think about what might be floating below the surface. A dead frog. A rat. Something worse. You pass the tanner's pit on the way home. It's still bubbling, still stinking. Nothing stops the stink. Not even death. You think about that sometimes, how life just keeps rolling forward even after someone stops breathing. The pigs still snort, the fire still burns, and the leather still has to be scraped clean. If you stop moving, you get left behind. Or buried. But today you're not left behind, you're going to a wedding. Yes, a wedding, in the middle of all this. It's not fancy. No one has anything to wear that isn't stained or torn, and the bride's shoes are 2 sizes too big, borrowed from a cousin who didn't survive last spring. But the bells are ringing anyway, and that's reason enough to gather. Here's your historical fact while you brush mud off your tunic. Tudor weddings, especially among the lower classes, were far more practical than romantic. Marriage was less about love and more about survival. You needed a partner to help raise children, work the land, or just afford a rent on a 1-room cottage with a roof that barely held up against the rain. Girls were often married by 12 or 13, sometimes younger, and boys weren't far behind. Puberty wasn't just biology, it was a deadline. You arrive at the little chapel with your family, squinting through the smoke from a nearby cook fire. The priest is already there, looking exhausted and slightly drunk, which probably means he's doing just fine. The couple stands in front of him. She's about your sister's age, and he's at least 20 years older, with a mouthful of crooked teeth and a smell that announces itself from 10 paces. No one bats an eye. This is a good match, relatively speaking. She'll have a roof over her head, and he'll have someone to keep his goats from wandering into the river again. Here's a fringe fact to pair with your uncomfortable squirming. In some parts of Tudor England, it was technically legal for girls as young as 9 to marry with parental consent, though the church discouraged it. Still there. The line between child and bride was a blurry one. In most cases, consummation was expected to wait until puberty, but expected and enforced are 2 very different things. And no one's comfortable with this. Not now, Not then, but hunger and social pressure don't wait for personal feelings. You look around at the gathered crowd, a few smiles, a few tears, some people just look tired. But when the couple says their vows, and the priest mumbles something halfway coherent, the whole village lets out a breath they've been holding since the sickness rolled through. It's not joy exactly, more like defiant normalcy, a reminder that life goes on, no matter how messy or tragic or utterly ridiculous it gets. Afterward, there's food. Not much, but more than you've seen in one place in weeks. A table is set with boiled eggs, hard bread, 2 pigeons someone shot illegally in the woods, and a pie of unknown origin that's already attracting flies. You eat anyway, because it's food. You don't ask what's in the pie. If it tastes good and doesn't move, that's enough. There's dancing too, clumsy, chaotic, and full of elbows. But it counts. Someone finds a fiddle, badly tuned but still technically musical. A few older women clap along, and the kids run in circles until someone falls and cries. You find yourself smiling, not because you're happy exactly, but because this feels almost like life again, like a memory instead of a reality. As the evening wears on, the adults start drinking. Ale flows, weak and sour, but enough to warm the stomach and blur the edges of grief. Someone sings a ballad about a sailor who falls in love with a mermaid and drowns trying to impress her. It ends with everyone laughing, not because it's funny, but because it's better than crying. Let's talk ale, since it's everywhere right now. Historical fact: Tudor ale wasn't just a drink, it was a necessity. Water was often unsafe to consume, especially in towns, so even children drank ale daily. It was weak, more like liquid bread, but it was boiled and safer than the local stream. Every household brewed its own, often in small batches, and women, known as alewives, were in charge of production. Some became famous for their recipes, others went bankrupt trying to pass off moldy barley as drinkable. Here's your quirky twist. Alewives sometimes wore tall hats to stand out in the market, and some historians believe this fashion may have influenced the image of the stereotypical witch. Big hats, bubbling pots, mysterious herbs? Check. Check and check, and yes, that's up for scholarly debate. Some call it a reach. Others say it's one of the few bits of wardrobe history that stuck around. You drink a bit of ale yourself, handed to you by your father without comment. It tastes sour and earthy, like something fermented in an old boot, but it's oddly comforting. The warmth hits your chest and slowly spreads through your limbs. You lean back against the edge of a wagon, watching the firelight flicker on everyone's tired, smudged faces. Someone tells a joke about a priest, a pig, and a nun, completely inappropriate, wildly inaccurate, and deeply funny. The bride laughs so hard she snorts, and her new husband looks at her like she just pulled the sun down from the sky. The fire burns lower. People start drifting away one by one into the night. Your mother calls for you, but her voice is soft, gentle. There's no rush, just the long walk home under stars that feel closer than usual. You survived a sickness. You witnessed a wedding. You ate mystery pie and drank boot ale. And for one night, the world almost made sense. The first thing you do when you wake up is listen. It's not habit, it's instinct. The way your ears reach into the silence before your eyes even open. Is anyone coughing? Screaming? Did the pig knock over the firewood again? Nothing. Just the soft snore of your father and the steady, rhythmic breath of your mother beside the fire. Even your sister sounds better this morning. Her wheezing's quieter, like a storm that's finally moving on. You let out a slow breath. Still here. The second thing you do is sniff. You've become a connoisseur of Tudor aromas. And today it's a familiar one. Sour milk, damp earth, smoke, and something worse. An unignorable sharpness that you recognise instantly. Someone dumped their chamber pot right outside the door again. Perfect. You pull the blanket up over your nose and briefly consider staying horizontal forever. But that's not really an option, is it? You drag yourself to your feet, scrape some grime from the soles of your feet against the wooden threshold, and open the door with the kind of grim optimism only a Tudor peasant can muster. The morning slaps you in the face. Not with light, because the sky is still the same depressing wash of grey as always, but with a cold gust of wind and the full bouquet of last night's village-wide bodily expulsions. You're not even mad. Just disappointed. You sidestep the puddle of human waste like a seasoned acrobat and make your way down the lane, waving at no one, because no one is making eye contact this early. Most of the villagers are hunched over their morning routines, stoking fires, scrubbing at clothes, yelling at children with one shoe. You head toward the river, not for swimming, obviously, just for relief, because your house doesn't have a toilet. It has a bucket. And after a certain point, you don't want to share a bucket with 4 other people and a pig. Let's get your historical fact out of the way, because this one matters more than you think. Most people in Tudor England did not have access to proper toilets. The rich had what they called privies, often built over streams or pits and sometimes lined with stone or wood. The poor? Buckets. If you lived near a river, it became your toilet, your bath, your laundry tub and your water source, a true multi-purpose horror. And here's a charming little fringe fact. Some people didn't even bother with buckets. They just went wherever it was convenient, alleyways, doorsteps, or directly into the street if they were feeling bold. This led to some truly creative laws, like one from Norwich that fined residents for relieving themselves in churchyards. Because yes, apparently that needed to be spelled out. As for scholarly debate, there's plenty of disagreements about just how bad the sanitation really was. Some argue that people understood cleanliness better than we give them credit for, that they used herbs, soaps, and regular routines to keep healthy. Others insist that the average Tudor street made a modern landfill look like a spa. Judging by the state of the lane right now, you're siding with Team Gross. At the riverbank, you do what you came to do, quickly, discreetly, and then splash your hands in the water, which is so cold it burns. A dead fish floats by, staring at you with one eye. You try not to read into it. Nearby, 2 women are knee-deep in the water, pounding laundry against rocks and gossiping loudly enough to be heard from the next village. Something about Mistress Joan and the shepherd. You pause, pretending to tie your shoe, just to hear the next bit. Apparently, he left a sheep tied outside her door at midnight, which is either deeply romantic or deeply insulting depending on the mood. You head back home with wet fingers and a fresh sense of village scandal. The pig greets you with a snort and immediately attempts to nibble the bottom of your tunic. You swat it away gently and it grumbles, offended. Your mother is inside, spooning a grey paste into a bowl. Breakfast, of course. You recognise the look on her face. It's the same one she wears when patching a sock that's more whole than sock. She hands you the bowl. You sit near the fire, which crackles weakly, trying its best to pretend it's not made entirely of damp twigs. The porridge is hot, which is nice. It's also bland, which is accepted. You stir it slowly, hoping to uncover something interesting at the bottom, maybe a berry or a scrap of meat forgotten from yesterday. No such luck. Midway through eating, there's a knock at the door. Not urgent, not angry, just a polite tap-tap. Your father opens it to find the reeve standing there, the man in charge of village law and land duties. He's got a roll of parchment into one hand and a face that says, "You're not going to like this," which is rarely a good sign. Your father listens, nods once, then closes the door with a sigh. "They're asking for help clearing the drainage ditch," he says, already reaching for his boots. "Whole thing backed up. Smells worse than usual." You're not sure how anything could smell worse than usual, but then again it is the ditch. A long, shallow trench that runs along the village edge, meant to carry away waste and rainwater. In theory. In reality, it's a festering swamp of old hay, dead rats, rotten vegetables, and whatever else people have been too lazy to deal with. And today, it's your job. By midday, you're knee-deep in it. You and half a dozen others, men, boys, even one unlucky widow, armed with shovels, sticks, and hopeless optimism. You gag more than once. Someone finds half a shoe and a pig skull. Someone else uncovers a surprisingly intact doll's head, which is somehow creepier than anything else in the trench. Your hands blister quickly, but you don't complain. Complaining only gets you extra work or a boot in the backside. So you dig, gag, sweat, and dig some more. The air is thick with flies. The sun finally appears, just long enough to make the smell worse. You wonder idly how many more years of this you've got before you're too sick, too sore, or too dead to care. Another historical fact for the road: public sanitation projects in Tudor villages were usually enforced by local officials like the reeve or the constable, and every able-bodied man, and sometimes woman, was expected to pitch in. If you didn't, fines. Public shaming or worse. In bigger towns, you might be thrown into the stocks. In the countryside, you'd just find your firewood missing the next morning. You work until your arms ache and your stomach grumbles again, and finally the reeve waves you off. "Enough for today," he says. "Storm's coming tomorrow." No use digging more just to have it flood again. You trudge home, filth up to your knees, face streaked with sweat, and something that might be old turnip. You strip at the door and your mother tosses you a rag that barely qualifies as a towel. Still, the fire feels good, and even the bland porridge waiting for dinner tastes like victory after a day in the ditch. That night, curled up next to the pig, who smells better than you do, you close your eyes and dream of a world where waste disappears into holes, where clean water comes from taps, and where you never, ever have to fish a rat out of a trench again. The next morning the wind has teeth, not the playful kind that nips at your cheeks and makes you laugh, it's the bitter kind, sharp and relentless, that slices through wool and skin and ambition with equal precision. You've barely opened the door before it hits you, and for a second you reconsider stepping outside at all, but your father's already barking something about firewood and the pig is pacing like it's late for a meeting, so you tighten your cloak and march into it like a soldier going to battle. Your boots, if they can still be called that, squish in the half-frozen muck of the lane. Frost rims the puddles like cracked glass, and someone's already slipped and cursed loud enough to make the nearby chickens flinch. You tiptoe past the well, where the bucket's frozen solid inside the stone ring. Someone's thrown a rock at it in frustration. It didn't help. You head toward the smithy to warm up for a moment. The blacksmith, Master Elric, is one of the few people in the village who always seems busy, even when everyone else is pretending they're not cold. His forge glows like a hearth from some forgotten heaven. You stand near the door, just out of the way, soaking up the heat as he hammers something flat and glowing. "Cold morning," he mutters, not looking up. You nod. Colder than yesterday. He squints at the sky. Ale weather. That's all the conversation you're getting from him. But it's enough. Just being near fire, near the clang and spark of real work, is grounding. So let's talk about ale again. Because you can't escape it. Not here, not now, not in Tudor England. Historical fact incoming, everyone drinks ale, men, women, toddlers. If your gums are showing, you've probably had a sip. The reason? Water is dangerous, untreated, often polluted, and suspiciously full of wriggling things. Ale, on the other hand, is boiled during brewing, making it safer to drink. Plus, it fills your stomach and takes the edge off the cold. It's not strong ale, mind you. Not what you'd call getting plastered strength. It's more like drinkable bread. And it goes with everything. Porridge, turnips, sad salted meat, even worse decisions. You once saw a man clean a wound with ale. Not because it was smart, but because it was all he had. Now here's your fringe fact to add some fizz to the mug. Some Tudor households kept ale logs, marking down who brewed when, how strong it was, and how long it lasted. Women were often the brewers, alewives as they were called, and good ale could boost a family's reputation. Bad ale, on the other hand, might get you fined by the local ale taster, a real job that involved drinking and judging everyone's booze. Sounds fun, until you realise you're sipping moldy barley from a mug last washed in 1530. There's even scholarly argument about just how drunk everyone was, all the time. Some say Tudor folk were tipsy from morning to night, floating through their miserable lives on a gentle barley haze. Others argue that most ale was so weak it barely counted, just enough alcohol to sterilise, not enough to stagger. Based on how often you've seen a man faceplant into a pig trough by noon, you suspect the truth depends on the day. Back at the forge, Master Elric waves you off eventually. Too many sparks. Too many boots in the way. So you wander back toward the centre of the village, where something unexpected is happening. The alehouse is open. Now, this isn't a pub in the cosy, candle-lit sense. This is a smoky, crooked room at the back of a widow's cottage, where a table sags under the weight of 3 clay mugs and a small keg with a splinter the size of your thumb sticking out of it. There's no sign, no fire, just the scent of warm yeast and disappointment. But you step inside anyway, because why not? There are 2 men already seated, your uncle and someone you don't recognise except by the scar that cuts across his cheek like a poorly aimed sword swing. They nod at you and you nod back, because nodding is the Tudor handshake. Your uncle pushes a half-full mug toward you without speaking. You take it, because that's what you do. It's warm, sour, bitter at the back of the throat. You've had better, but you've also had worse. You sip slowly, listening to the men talk, not gossip, real talk. Tax collectors, road thieves, the price of grain rising again because of some bad weather in Kent. They talk like it matters, like their opinions carry weight, even though you all know nothing will change. And yet here's what's strange. The alehouse is where people speak the most truth. Not in church, not in the market, but here, between splinters and sips. This is where you hear how the steward's daughter ran off with a tailor, how the reeve might be skimming from the grain stores, how the new priest doesn't actually know Latin. Ale makes people honest, or brave, or foolish, sometimes all three. You sit for a while letting the warmth settle in your chest, grateful to feel something other than cold or hunger, or the quiet dread that clings to most days. Eventually the widow comes in and opens a shutter for light, which ruins the atmosphere and signals that it's time to leave. You hand back the mug, nod again, and slip out into the wind. Your house smells like boiling turnips and wet socks when you return. Your mother gives you a look and you give her the same one back. Yes, I drank ale at 11 in the morning. No, I didn't fall in the ditch. That seems to satisfy her. You help stoke the fire, add some twigs, and sit by your sister who's drawing shapes in the ash with one grubby finger. Later, as night falls and the fire pops and cracks like it's trying to scare away the dark, your father tells a story. Not a good one, not even one with an ending. Something about a knight who challenges a devil to a drinking contest. But it's enough. You lean against the wall and listen, letting the hum of the fire and the fading buzz of morning ale lull you into something like peace. This life is hard, brutal even, but every now and then, on days when the ale is warm and the fire is kind and the cold doesn't bite quite so deep, you can almost pretend it's not. The tooth has to come out. It's been bothering you for weeks now, a dull throb at first, then a sharp chipped jab whenever you chew anything tougher than boiled onion. You tried ignoring it. You tried rinsing with ale. Your mother even tied a string around your head so tight your ear went numb, swearing the pressure would smother the worm. No such luck. Last night it swelled up like a ripe plum, and this morning your face looks like you tried to fight a goat and lost. Your father takes one look and says flatly, "We'll go see Mad Bess." You've never seen Mad Bess pull a tooth before, but you've heard things, stories, mostly whispered by kids who are trying to scare each other. She lives near the edge of the village in a hut made of patchy timber and stone, with bones hanging from the doorframe and bundles of herbs nailed above the windows. She's not a barber surgeon or a trained physician, Tudor peasants can't afford those anyway, but she knows enough about pain and blood to get the job done. You trudge along behind your father, one hand pressed against your swollen jaw, your stomach lurching with every step. He doesn't talk, just walks steadily ahead, his boots squelching in the early morning muck. A pair of crows watches you from a bare tree branch. You wonder briefly if they know what's about to happen. Here's your historical fact, and this one's a doozy. Dental care in Tudor England was more superstition than science. There were no toothbrushes for common folk, no anaesthetic, and definitely no concept of sterilisation. If your tooth hurt, you either lived with it or yanked it out. Barber surgeons, the same people who might bleed you or set a broken arm, often handled tooth removal. They used pliers, fingers, or even knives, depending on what was available. Clean tools were optional. Sobbing was standard. And here's your extra wretched fringe fact. Some people believe that toothaches were caused by toothworms, tiny creatures that lived inside your teeth and gnawed their way through the enamel. Treatments included burning herbs, stuffing the tooth with garlic, or, my personal favourite, holding a dead mouse against your cheek. Does it work? No. Do people try it anyway? Absolutely sure, Julie. There's still scholarly debate over whether the toothworm theory was symbolic or literal. Some historians argue that it was just a metaphor used to explain a sensation no one understood. Others point to descriptions of wiggling white things seen in decayed teeth, likely nerve tissue or maggots, because yes, it gets worse. Either way, it didn't lead to better dentistry. You reach Bess's hut just as your courage begins to unravel. It smells of rosemary, mould, and something vaguely metallic, blood maybe. The door creaks open before your father even knocks. She's already waiting. Mad Bess is not actually mad. She just doesn't speak much and wears a necklace made of teeth, which tends to put people off. Her hair is grey, wiry, and tied back with twine. Her hands are strong and stained. She gestures for you to sit on a three-legged stool in the middle of the room and brings out a small wooden box. Inside, fleas, old ones, rusty, with curved jaws and a little notch worn smooth from use. You nearly bolt. "Hold him," she says. Your father grips your shoulders and leans his weight into you. You clench the stool like it might fly away. Bess doesn't waste time. She pries your mouth open, squints at the swollen gum, then nods like a carpenter sizing up a rotting beam. The pliers go in. You feel the metal scrape the tooth. You hear it grind against the bone. She pulls. The pain doesn't arrive all at once. It sneaks in, blooming like for fire in your jaw, and suddenly it's everything. You flail. You scream into your father's coat. The world shrinks to your face, your mouth, the cracking sound as the tooth gives up and slides free. She holds it up triumphantly. Blood drips down the metal. She drops it into a jar filled with other teeth and slaps a rag over your mouth. It's done. You sit there, stunned, while she packs the hole with a pinch of something dry and bitter. "Will sting," she mutters. She's right. You taste iron and smoke and whatever plant she just jammed into your bleeding gum. She hands you a small cloth bundle, some kind of poultice, and tells your father to boil it. Make tea and pour it down your throat twice a day until the swelling fades. Your father pays her with 2 eggs and a promise to patch her roof when the weather clears. You leave with your face still numb, your shirt soaked in tears and snot, and a sense of having been mugged by a very polite crow. When you return home, your mother tuts and dabs at your face with something cold and wet. She sits you by the fire and offers you broth so thin it barely counts as food. You drink it anyway, sipping from a wooden spoon and wincing with every swallow. The pain is a dull roar now, a throb in your cheek that seems to echo through your whole skull. You lie down on the floor, wrapped in a blanket that smells like goat. Your sister crawls over and rests her hand on your forehead. It's sticky but oddly comforting. The pig curls up next to you, its body warm and steady. The fire crackles. Your jaw pulses in time with your heartbeat. And then, finally, your body shuts down. You sleep. Hard. Deep. The kind of sleep that only comes after pain, fear, and a complete lack of dental insurance. The next day your mouth still hurts, but it's a different kind of pain. Quieter, cleaner. The swelling has gone down a little. You can eat broth without sobbing. Your father nods approvingly when he sees you upright. Your mother rubs rosemary on your cheek and says you'll be fine by harvest. Toothache. 1. You. Also 1 somehow. You've lost a piece of yourself, sure, but in Tudor England, that's just part of growing up. It's Sunday, which means it's time for God, gossip, and gratuitous violence. You wake to the tolling of the chapel bell, a slow, hollow clang that floats across the fields like someone hitting a cow with a frying pan. It's not a call you can ignore. Church attendance isn't optional. Not here, not in Tudor England, whether you're devout or just trying to stay on the Reeve's good side. Your behind is expected on a splintery bench before the second bell finishes ringing. You pull on your least-wet tunic, which still smells vaguely like mildew and dried turnip, and rinse your face in a half-frozen bucket. Your swollen gum still aches, but the bleeding's stopped, and your mother says that's good enough. She hands you a crust of bread for the walk, and you chew it slowly, carefully, like it might shatter your entire jaw if you bite too hard. The pig watches you leave with judgment in its eyes. The chapel sits at the far edge of the village, a squat stone building with a crooked wooden spire and a door that never fully closes. Inside, the air is damp and cold, filled with the murmur of half-hearted hymns and the rustle of straw-stuffed cloaks. You slip in quietly and find your usual spot near the back, close enough to see the altar but far enough away to avoid the priest's breath. He smells like onions and holy regret. Today's sermon is about again, it's always about sin. The priest reads from a heavy book with frayed edges and gold-painted letters, pausing every few verses to glare at the congregation like he knows exactly what you did last Tuesday, which is technically correct. Everyone saw you push Thomas into the ditch, but he started it. Here's your historical fact to hum along with the droning sermon. Religion permeated every aspect of life in Tudor England. It wasn't just a personal belief system, it was law, politics, morality, and community control all rolled into one. Church attendance was mandatory, and failure to show up could result in fines or public shaming. The state watched your soul closely. Not for your benefit, mostly for theirs. And speaking of watching souls, here comes your fringe fact. And it's a good one. During certain periods in Tudor history, parish churches were actually required to keep a church ale. Yes, that's exactly what it sounds like. A communal brew used to fund church repairs and raise money for the poor. These ale festivals were technically religious fundraisers, but in practice, absolute chaos, drinking, dancing, rude songs, and occasional brawls. Think of it as a Tudor bake sale, but with way more bruises. Scholars have argued over whether these events were true community gatherings or just excuses for sanctioned debauchery. Some suggest they were essential social outlets in an otherwise grim world. Others claim they undermined religious discipline and fueled the very sins the sermons warned against. The truth, probably a mix. No one sings quite like a man trying to outbelch his neighbour for charity. Back in the chapel, the priest has moved on to the subject of eternal damnation. He lists off sins with theatrical flourish: gluttony, sloth, lust, heresy, and the ever-popular idle chatter. You glance sideways at the girl 2 benches over, who has been staring at you for the last 10 minutes with a look halfway between curiosity and judgment. You quickly adjust your posture to look more devout and slightly less like someone imagining roast pheasant during communion. After the service, the real event begins. The village filters out into the square where the alehouse opens early, the baker starts hawking week-old rolls as Sunday specials, and everyone begins the so polite ritual of pretending they didn't fall asleep during the sermon. Your mother chats with the Reeves' wife. Your father nods once at a man he hasn't spoken to in 3 years. You wander toward the noise because today there's something special happening behind the church. Bear baiting. You round the corner to find a crowd already forming. In the centre is a crude wooden ring, muddy and lined with stakes, where a bear, tethered by a thick iron chain, is pacing back and forth, its heavy body swaying with each step. It looks tired, angry, confused. There's dried blood on its flank and a ring through its nose attached to a length of rope. The men who brought it in are already collecting wagers. The dogs haven't arrived yet, but the barking echoes in the distance. Let's just dive straight into your historical fact, because yes, bear baiting was a very real and very popular pastime in Tudor England. It was considered entertainment for all classes, kings and commoners alike. The bear, often starved or weakened beforehand, would be chained in place while dogs were released to attack it. Spectators cheered, bets were placed, children watched. No one blinked. Your fringe fact is even more unsettling. Queen Elizabeth I herself was a fan. She reportedly ordered performances of bear baiting to be included in royal festivities, even declining to attend a play if it meant missing out on a match. There's a record of one event where a bull, a bear and a group of dogs were all let loose in the same ring while the Queen looked on. So yes, that Shakespeare play you studied in school might have been the second most popular event that afternoon. Of course, there's scholarly debate here too. Some historians argue bear baiting wasn't just mindless violence. It was a display of power, a symbolic way of mastering nature. Others say, nah, it was just brutal fun for bored people. Either way, you're here now, shoulder to shoulder with half the village, watching grown men hoot and shove each other in anticipation of watching a bear get mauled by dogs. You don't know how to feel about it. The older boys are excited, practically vibrating with glee. The younger children cling to their mothers. You're somewhere in the middle, fascinated, but queasy. The dogs arrive, snarling and straining at their leashes. The crowd roars. The bear roars back. Then it begins. You won't remember the details, just flashes. A dog thrown through the air like a rag. A paw swiping red through the mud. Laughter. Screams. The metallic taste of fear in your mouth that has nothing to do with your toothache. When it's over, the bear is still breathing. The dogs are not. People cheer, coins change hands. Someone hands you a chunk of dried apple and says, "First time." You nod. Later you walk home in silence. Your father doesn't mention the fight. Your mother doesn't ask how it was. No one says anything. But that night, as you lie in the dark next to the pig and listen to your sister breathe, you keep seeing the bear's eyes. Big, black and terribly human. You fall asleep with a question lingering in your mind, one you don't have the words for yet. But it gnaws at you just the same. Why do we cheer when things suffer? You're up before the sun the next day. Not because you want to be, but because someone's shouting in the lane again. Sharp, panicked, and way too loud for this hour. Your first thought is fire. Your second is the pig got into the grain. But when you peek through the shutter, the truth is somehow worse. It's Father Aldwin, the village priest, being dragged from his chapel by 2 men in unfamiliar cloaks. They're armed, wearing badges that gleam even in the gloom, and they've already tied his hands behind his back. You blink the sleep from your eyes. This has nothing to do with pigs or fire. This is bigger. This is religion, which in Tudor England is like lightning, unpredictable, fatal, and just as likely to hit your neighbour as you. By the time you get outside, a crowd has formed. No one dares speak. People just stare as Father Aldwin is hauled past the bakery and down the road toward the edge of the village, where a horse cart waits. Ominous and splattered with the kind of stains that don't come out. His robes are askew, his mouth is tight. He doesn't cry or beg. He just walks, barefoot and muddy, as if he's known this was coming. Someone whispers, "He said Mass last week, in Latin." Someone else replies, "And gave bread to that widow without asking the steward." The first voice snaps, "He was always a papist," or else it was. The second one mumbles back, "Still don't mean he should hang for it." And there it is, the unspeakable word, papist. Here comes your historical fact. Tudor England was a religious war zone in disguise. After Henry VIII broke from the Catholic Church in the 1530s, England ping-ponged between Protestantism and Catholicism with every new monarch. Under Henry, the Church of England was formed. Under Edward VI, things got more Protestant. Then Bloody Mary, swung the country back to Catholicism, burning Protestants by the dozen. Then Elizabeth I turned it Protestant again. If you're confused, congratulations. So was everyone else. Religious identity wasn't just a personal belief. It was a matter of loyalty, politics, and survival. Saying the wrong prayer could brand you a traitor. Owning the wrong Bible could get you fined. Protecting a priest, execution. Your fringe fact is an eerie one. Priest holes. Secret hiding spots built into homes of loyal Catholics to conceal clergy during raids. These could be beneath floorboards, behind fireplaces, even tucked inside false walls. Some were so well constructed that priests survived multiple searches. Others died in them, trapped, starved, or suffocated when their hosts were arrested, and never came back. Imagine being sealed in a cupboard for days with only silence and the sound of boots upstairs. Now here's the scholarly split. Some argue the average villager didn't care much about these religious swings. They just followed whatever rules would keep them alive and fed. Others believe that, yes, there were passionate believers on both sides, and the conflict ran deep even in the countryside. You're not sure where your village lands. Some people cross themselves when they pass the chapel. Others spit. Most just keep their heads down, but right now heads are up. Eyes wide. Father Aldwyn is gone, dragged down the road like a sack of stolen grain. The cart creaks out of view. No one breathes for a long minute. Then, as if a spell is broken, someone coughs. Another mutters, "Best get to the fields," and life resumes, but differently. You walk home with a weird ache in your chest. Not quite grief, not quite fear. Something in between. Your sister tugs your sleeve and asks, "Where's the priest going?" You don't know how to answer. At lunch, your mother says grace, but it's different. Shorter, Protestant, no saints, no Latin. You notice her glance at the door as if half expecting soldiers to kick it in mid-prayer. Your father doesn't say much, just picks at his pottage and mutters something about keeping the roof repaired and the chickens in the pen. He doesn't want trouble, no one does. Not here, but it's not over. The next day, another cart rolls through, this time with pamphlets. A man hands them out like bread, smiling with too many teeth. He says they're from London. A new order, he calls it, for the glory of the true church. You don't read, but you see the symbols, crosses, flames, and something that looks suspiciously like Queen Elizabeth, with a crown on one page and a sword on the next. People murmur. Some take them, some pretend not to see. Later that night the village meets, quietly, behind the blacksmith's barn. Not everyone comes. Just the older men and a few trusted women. You sneak close enough to listen through the slats. The reeve is speaking, low and fast. "They'll be back," he says. "They're testing us. First the priest, next they'll want someone to name names. Anyone who went to Aldwyn's Mass, anyone who confessed." A woman's voice cuts in. "But we didn't do anything wrong." The reeve sighs. "Right and wrong don't matter now, just quiet and loud, stay quiet." And there it is again. That same lesson Tudor life keeps teaching you. Keep your head down. Smile at the right people, never stand out unless you can afford to, and you can't. Here's another ugly little historical wrinkle. Execution for heresy wasn't rare. If you were found practicing the wrong version of Christianity, depending on the year and the monarch, you could be burned at the stake, hanged, or worse. Public executions were social events. Children watched. Vendors sold pies. It was part punishment, part propaganda. A reminder, this could be you. That evening you see smoke on the horizon. Not a house fire, not a bakery mishap. Something larger, controlled. You tell yourself it is just someone clearing brush, but your stomach knots anyway. At home, your mother pulls a rosary from the bottom of her chest and wraps it in cloth. She hands it to you, wordlessly, and gestures toward the pigsty. You dig a shallow hole behind the wall beneath the pig's water trough and bury it. Later, as you fall asleep by the fire, your father's voice breaks the silence. He says, "People forget. We were all Catholic once, and before that, something else. And after this, something else again." You don't answer. You just listen to the fire crackle and wonder what version of faith will be safest next week. In Tudor England, salvation is dangerous, belief is negotiable, and silence is your best prayer. The first frost comes in the night, a quiet thief that slips in while everyone sleeps and leaves a layer of icy breath across the village. You wake to see the world dusted in pale silver, each blade of grass stiff as bone, each rooftop shimmering like a crown. Beautiful, in that cruel way nature sometimes is, where even the loveliest things feel like a warning. Your mother's already up hauling the last of the firewood indoors, swearing under her breath about how cold this cracks old bones. She's layered herself in every scrap of fabric she can find, which mostly means wool over stained linen. You do the same. Your tunic is coarse and smells like damp cellar, but it traps body heat well enough if you keep moving. And moving is the key. If you stop even for a moment, the cold climbs in under your clothes and settles like a tenant in your ribs. As you stand near the hearth, warming your fingers, your sister appears behind you, bundled up, face red and playing with something in her hands. You lean closer and see it's your mother's face powder, at least what's left of it. She's smeared it across her cheeks and forehead like war paint. "You're not supposed to touch that," you mutter. She shrugs. "Makes me look like a queen." See, you laugh, though it's short and low, because technically she's not wrong. Lead-based makeup was all the rage among Tudor nobility, especially under Queen Elizabeth I's. Pale skin meant wealth, proof that you weren't outside labouring under the sun like the rest of us. The whiter, the better. And if your complexion didn't naturally resemble parchment, no problem, and just slather on a thick layer of ceruse, a deadly combination of white lead and vinegar. It worked too for a while, until your teeth fell out, your hair thinned, and your skin turned to paper. Minor details. Here's your delightfully disturbing fringe fact. The Queen herself, Elizabeth, yes. That Elizabeth was rumoured to apply her white makeup in such thick layers that cracks would form during long speeches. One courtier even noted that she wore a mask within a mask, suggesting that beneath the ceruse was a very real face of illness and decay. But no one dared mention it, because you don't tell a monarch that their eyebrows are melting. Some scholars argue the makeup wasn't solely about beauty, it was also a form of armour, a public mask, power through appearance. Others insist vanity ruled, plain and simple. After all, Elizabeth was a woman ruling a kingdom of men. Being ghostly was one way to be untouchable, literally. No one wanted to get too close. You wipe the powder from your sister's cheeks with the corner of your sleeve, half laughing, half nervous. The stuff was expensive, passed down from a merchant's wife your mother once helped birth twins, and it's only brought out on holy days or the rare occasion someone important wanders through. You're not supposed to play with it. And you're definitely not supposed to wear it around the house like a toddler impersonating royalty. Your mother doesn't scold her though, just glances over, sighs, and returns to slicing turnips with the same dull blade that's been in your family longer than you have. Later that morning, you're sent to the manor. Not to the grand hall, of course, not even near the kitchen entrance, just to the stables, where your father helps mend harnesses, and your older cousin shovels hay with the kind of energy only someone trying to avoid being noticed can muster. You arrive just in time to catch a glimpse of her, Lady Cecily, the daughter of the manor lord home from court for winter. She steps from the covered carriage like she's gliding, one foot wrapped in fur-lined slippers, the other brushing the ground with almost deliberate slowness. Her dress is pale green, silk or something, trying very hard to pretend to be silk. Her neck is wrapped in fox fur. Her hands are bare. No dirt under those nails. You freeze. Everyone does. Because here's the thing, fashion in Tudor England could kill you. Actual fact, nobles, especially women, often wore tight corsets stiffened with whalebone or iron. These weren't the flexible waist cinches you might be imagining, they were actual cages, and beneath the layers of lace and embroidery were farthingales, hooped skirts that turned doorways into enemies and staircases into death traps. Add on layers of wool, fur, and heavily scented oils to cover up the fact that bathing was rare, and you've got an outfit that's roughly as comfortable as a coffin, and about as breathable. Now here's your fashionably twisted fringe fact. One noblewoman reportedly collapsed at a feast when her corset cut off circulation to her lungs. Another caught fire when her farthingale brushed too close to a hearth. It was said she burned like a candle. Whether that's true or just a gothic embellishment passed around by jealous chambermaids, we'll never know. Back in the stables, Lady Cecily vanishes inside, leaving a trail of perfume and silk behind her. The stable hand beside you mutters, "Bet she smells like heaven and rotting apples." You're not sure what that means, but it sounds poetic. Your father hands you a bundle of straw and nods toward the mule stall. You get to work, sneaking glances at the manor door. There's no part of you that wants to be noble, too many rules, too many corsets, but there's a strange magnetism to it all. The furs, the powdered faces, the idea of walking without mud between your toes. By midday your fingers are raw from work and the cold has crept back into your bones. The sun hasn't shown its face all day, just a pale blur behind a gauze of clouds. The world feels faded. You walk home, sore and silent, passing villagers hauling wood, dumping waste or picking frostbitten cabbages from dying gardens. The frost still clings to the roofs. A bird lies frozen in the lane, stiff, one wing splayed like it fell mid-flight and just gave up. Inside your cottage, the fire is down to embers. Your mother hums while stirring a pot of something thin and steamy. Your sister has powdered her face again, this time with flour. She grins at you like she's already ruling half the village. You smile back and it's genuine, because sometimes pretending is all you've got. You sit by the fire and peel off your boots. Your big toe is turning a shade of purple that doesn't seem ideal. You wiggle it, still attached. Good enough. That night, as you drift off beside the pig, your sister whispers, "Do you think queens get cold?" You think about it. About the corsets, the powdered faces, the fake smiles. You roll over and answer honestly. Probably, but I bet they lie about it. You hear them before you see them, slow hoofbeats echoing along the frozen path, metallic rattle that doesn't belong to any cart you know, and the faint creak of leather and wood. You're outside when they come into view. Two men on horseback, cloaked in black, faces hidden under wide-brimmed hats, and masks shaped like birds. The kind of birds that don't sing. The kind with curved beaks made for sniffing death. Your sister runs to the doorway, wide-eyed. "Are they?" "Yes," your mother mutters, pulling her back. "Plague doctors." Even she sounds unsure. Because here, in your tiny village where the most excitement you've had in months was watching the pig chase a goose into the well, plague doctors are things of rumour, figures out of stories whispered by merchants and travellers with a gift for exaggeration. But these men are real. Real horses, real cloaks, and those horrible masks, like something from a nightmare drawn by a child with a charcoal stick and too much imagination. You stand still as they ride past. They don't speak, don't look at you. Just follow the road to the other side of the village, where someone's home has been marked. A red X painted over the door, dripping like it bled onto the wood. You don't even know who lives there. Or rather, you did once. Now, no one answers the knock. Let's get your historical fact out before the dread gets any heavier. Plague doctors were real, though not always helpful. In Tudor England, during plague outbreaks, especially the sweating sickness or the dreaded bubonic, cities and larger towns might send plague physicians into infected areas. They wore long coats waxed against moisture, gloves, and that infamous beaked mask stuffed with herbs, flowers, and vinegar-soaked cloth. The theory? Bad smells cause disease. If you couldn't smell the rot, you were safe. That's science. Ish. And here's your absolutely cursed fringe fact. Some plague doctors weren't even trained. Not properly, sometimes they were just people paid to carry out quarantine orders, write down death counts, or poke corpses to see if they were done. The masks and cloaks gave them authority. The stick they carried, that was for examining bodies from a distance, or occasionally beating back the desperate. There's ongoing scholarly debate about how effective they actually were. Some say they were symbolic, more for public reassurance than actual medical impact. Others insist their role in maintaining order, documenting outbreaks, and enforcing quarantine made a difference, even if they didn't understand what disease was. Either way, their presence meant one thing: something worse was here. After the riders disappear into the haze, no one speaks. A few villagers wander out to stare down the road. Some cross themselves, some spit. One old man turns and heads straight for the alehouse. Your mother pulls you inside and shuts the door. That night no one eats much. The pot on the fire is mostly broth, more water than food. Your father says nothing. Your sister curls up in her blanket and pretends to sleep, but her eyes are open, reflecting the firelight like a cat. There's a silence in the house. Not the usual end-of-day quiet, but something thick, watching, waiting. In the days that follow, things shift. Slowly at first. The market doesn't set up. People stop sharing tools. The midwife's hut is shuttered. You're told not to visit your cousins. The chapel bell stops ringing. Then more houses are marked. Red X's blooming across doors like infected wounds. You see one painted on the butcher's house, and you know it's serious. Because if the butcher's gone, meat is over. By the third day, everyone's gone indoors. You don't see neighbours anymore. Just smoke barely rising and the occasional flicker of eyes behind a shutter. Your mother seals the windows with cloth soaked in vinegar. She hangs bundles of dried lavender and rosemary by the door and tells you not to touch your face. You didn't even know that was something to worry about before now. Your father starts sleeping with his boots on, just in case. You learn a new word. Quarantine. It's not spoken often, and when it is, it's spat like a curse. If your house is marked, no one brings food. No one comes in, no one leaves. You survive, or don't, inside your own walls. And if you die... The cart comes at night. You hear it once, a creaking, groaning sound, the slow roll of wheels across frozen mud. No horses, just men with torches dragging a tarp behind them. Your sister develops a cough. It starts as a tickle, then a wheeze, then a rattle in her chest that doesn't go away, even when your mother presses hot cloths to her back and whispers prayers in a voice you've never heard her use before. Your sister's eyes go glassy. She stops asking for food. She just lies there, her breath shallow, cheeks flushed with the wrong kind of colour. Your mother forbids anyone from leaving the house. Your father boards the door from the inside. You move your sleeping spot away from the hearth and closer to the far wall. Not because you're afraid of your sister, but because she screams at night now. Softly, like she's stuck in a dream she can't wake from. You ask your mother if you should call for the doctor. There is no doctor, she says, only the men with masks. You don't know what's worse, dying from the plague or being taken by the ones who pretend they can cure it. Here's your final historical fact for this moment of dread. Whole families were known to disappear behind boarded doors. If one member fell sick, the rest were locked in. Some survived, many didn't. And once the door was sealed, it was often days, sometimes weeks, before anyone came to check. By then, the silence inside said everything. The days blur. Your sister moans in her sleep. Your mother weeps into her shawl when she thinks you're not looking. Your father keeps a knife close, not for protection, but because sometimes people panic. Desperate men break into unmarked homes for food. Or worse, revenge. Then one morning, your sister wakes. Her fever breaks like a sudden storm passing. Her skin is pale, soaked, but cooler. Her breathing slows. She eats 2 spoonfuls of broth and asks about the pig. No one speaks for a moment. Then your mother collapses into a heap, sobbing into her hands. Your father walks outside and sits on the steps in silence. You just stare at your sister, as if blinking might undo her. She survives. Your home is never marked. You never see the plague doctors again. But for the rest of your life, you'll remember those days. The masks, the smell of vinegar-soaked cloth, the silence of neighbours who vanished overnight, and the strange creeping truth that even the worst things sometimes pass, but not without leaving something behind. You're still jumpy when the frost starts to melt and the air shifts from death-scented stillness to that slushy, soggy mess that counts as early spring. People are starting to come out again, tentatively, like animals testing the wind after a storm. The shutters creak open, chimneys cough back to life, and the lane fills once more with the sound of pigs squealing and children shouting and carts bumping over stones like the plague never happened. But you know it did. You can feel it in the way your mother flinches every time your sister coughs. You hear it in the silence when someone asks, "Whatever happened to the Ferris family?" And no one answers. You see it in the eyes of the Reeve, who used to puff out his chest like a man in charge and now walks like his shoes are made of stone. Still, life picks up again, because it has to. You can't cry into your stew forever. Which brings us to today's challenge, surviving another Tudor winter hangover with no central heating. That's right, it's laundry day. because after months of sickness, soot and cold sweat, everything you own smells like pig bedding left in a bog. And while there's no such thing as clean in the Tudor world, there is such a thing as less disgusting. You're helping your mother haul a tub of grey water toward the stream, slipping through mud so thick it threatens to swallow your shoes every 3 steps. The wooden tub leaks from a crack patched with cloth, and you're pretty sure the lye soap at the bottom just winked out of existence from sheer embarrassment. Here's your historical fact to ponder while your arms go numb. Central heating didn't exist for another few centuries, and unless you were one of the elite living in a castle or manor with a dedicated hearth in each room, you were relying on a single smoky fire in the middle of your one-room house. It didn't heat much, just made you smell like a chimney. The rest of the house? Cold. Your bed? Cold. The chamber pot you forgot to empty? Frozen. Absolutely frozen. In winter, the water bucket by the door turned solid by morning. The sheets, if you had them, crackled with frost. And if you thought putting your feet on a cold floor was bad, try sharing a straw mattress with 4 siblings, a pig, and a draft that could probably knock over a toddler. The fringe fact for today: people slept fully clothed. Not just because it was cold, but because getting undressed at night was a luxury move. You wore your outer tunic as a blanket, your inner tunic as pyjamas, and your hat stayed firmly on your head even while sleeping. Some folks even curled up with hot stones wrapped in cloth if they were lucky enough to have stones and not just a warm pig. And let's not forget the great Tudor invention, the bedstock. These were beds with curtains, but not for privacy. Oh no, the curtains were to trap heat. Entire families slept in the same bed, drawing the curtains tight and tucking in with whatever warmth they could scrape together. A human soup, basically. Back at the stream you scrub and scrub and scrub. Your hands are red and raw, the lye soap stings the cuts on your fingers, and the water is so cold it might as well be punishment for something you did in a past life. Maybe you were a noble then. This is your payback. Your mother doesn't talk much while she works. Her face is tight, focused. You notice how she pauses now and then to rest her back, or how she rubs her wrists when she thinks you're not looking. Winter ages people in Tudor England. You go into it 40 and come out 60. After the 3rd tunic and the 2nd accidental splash to the face, your cousin appears. He's grinning, which is never a good sign. "It's sheep burning day," he says. You blink. "Come again?" "Sheep burning. You know, for the hooves. We're branding and cauterizing. Want to watch?" Naturally you do, because it beats laundry. You trail behind him up the hill to the pasture where the village shepherd has corralled a dozen woolly beasts into a makeshift pen. There's a small fire roaring nearby and a stack of iron tools heating in it. The air smells like singed hair and boiling muck. Everyone is excited. Time for your historical fact. Animal husbandry was a full-contact sport. Sheep were a valuable asset in Tudor England. Wool was a massive part of the economy. But sheep weren't just livestock, they were clothing, food, and sometimes dowry. Keeping them healthy meant trimming hooves, shearing, and yes, occasionally burning off rot or branding for ownership. You watch as one unlucky creature is hauled to the fire. Its legs flail, but the shepherd's got experience and a grim sort of efficiency. He presses the iron to the hoof with a hiss and a puff of smoke. The sheep kicks once, bleats, and goes still. Here's your unsettling fringe fact. Some people believed that branding animals helped protect them from evil spirits. Not just identification, but spiritual defense. The heat was seen as purifying. There were even prayers whispered during branding, muttered blessings that were equal parts superstition and survival instinct. You're not sure what you believe, but as the fire flares and the sheep quiets, you feel something ancient humming in your bones. One boy passes out, another throws up. You stand still, watching, half horrified, half fascinated. It's awful, but it's necessary. After the 4th sheep, you head home. Your clothes are damp, your hands stink of smoke and soap, and your mother scolds you for disappearing mid-wash. But when she sees the look on your face, she just sighs and hands you a chunk of bread. That night, the fire struggles to stay lit. You pile straw over your feet, curl into yourself like a cooked shrimp, and shiver beneath your tunic. The pig lies beside you, snorting softly, its belly warm against your legs. Your sister whispers, "Do you think it'll snow again?" You think about the stream, the sheep, the red X's and the masks. "I hope not," you whisper back. But snow, like plague, doesn't care what you hope for. You close your eyes and dream of a world where clothes dry overnight, where beds don't creak, and where heat comes from more than a single dying fire. Your sister's sick again, not plague sick, not like before, but something else, a lingering cough, burning forehead, and the kind of sunken eyes that make you feel older just looking at her. She barely moves anymore, just lies there, wrapped in scratchy wool, cheeks flushed with fever and lips dry from whispering things that don't make sense. Sometimes she thinks you're your father. Sometimes she thinks she's in the forest. Once, she tried to bite your mother because she swore she was being fed to wolves. You don't know what to do, no one does. You've done the vinegar, you've done the herbs. You've even buried a dead mole under the door because your aunt swore it would confuse the sickness. It hasn't. Today your father decides it's time for the big guns. He's calling the healer. Now to be clear, healer in Tudor England is a loose term. It might mean a midwife, an herb woman, a travelling hedge doctor, or some combination of the above. Sometimes it means the only person within 20 miles who won't try to bleed you to death for sneezing. In your case, it means old Ellsworth, who lives in the woods and smells like dried mushrooms and cold smoke. No one knows how old she is. Some say she's 100. Others swear she's the same woman who delivered their grandmother's grandmother. She arrives just before dusk, wrapped in layers that make her look like a bush with feet. Her hair is plaited into cords and tucked under a cap that might once have been a squirrel. She carries a bag that jingles and smells faintly of honey, mildew, and something sharp, maybe garlic, maybe regret. She doesn't say hello, just kneels beside your sister, pulls back the blanket, and places her hand on her forehead. Hot, she mutters, but not lost. You don't know what that means. You're not sure you want to. Now, time for your historical fact. Tudor medicine was equal parts guesswork, superstition, and very bad ideas. The most popular theory of the time was the four humours: blood, phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile. Health, people believed, came from keeping these in balance. Illness meant too much of one, so treatment usually involved purging, bleeding, or vomiting. Think leeches, enemas, and laxatives made from herbs your pig wouldn't touch. Lucky for your sister, old Ellsworth doesn't seem interested in bleeding anyone today. She pulls out a bundle of dried leaves and begins to crush them between her fingers. Elderflower, she mutters. Good for fever. Angelica for strength. And a little betony, in case something's watching. Watching? You don't ask. Here's your fringe fact to chew on while Ellsworth mutters and mixes. Many Tudor remedies included spiritual or magical elements, wards against spirits, protection from the evil eye, even chants murmured under the breath while mixing herbs. Some healers were also known as cunning folk, people who walked the line between medicine and magic, revered and feared in equal measure. Sometimes they were the first ones called, other times they were dragged off and burned as witches. Historians still argue about how much of Tudor medicine was science, and how much was performance. Did the herbs work? Sometimes. Did people believe in them enough that the belief itself helped? Probably. The placebo effect isn't new, it just used to wear a fox pelt and wave sage around the room. Ellsworth prepares a tea. Not in a cup, your family doesn't own cups, but in a chipped bowl that she fills with hot water from the hearth. She drops the crushed herbs in, stirs with a twig, then blows on the surface 3 times and mutters something in a language you don't understand. You lean in, curious. She smacks your hand. Don't breathe on it. You nod and back away. She lifts your sister gently and pours the tea into her mouth in slow sips. Some of it dribbles down her chin, most of it goes down. Your sister moans and turns her face away, but her eyes flutter. Open for a moment, then closed again. Ellsworth watches her breathe. Then she stands, bones cracking audibly, and digs into her bag again. This time she pulls out something truly alarming. A dried lizard. Ward, she says. Hang it above the bed. Keeps the bad ones out. You don't ask what the bad ones are. She looks at your mother. Keep her warm, change the straw, no raw meat. Don't open the windows. She's paid with 2 eggs and a lump of beeswax, which she accepts without comment. Then she's gone, back into the woods like some creature out of a ballet, disappearing between the trees before the moon fully rises. That night your sister sleeps. For the first time in days, she really sleeps. Quietly, no fever dreams, no muttering about wolves or flying pigs. Just steady breathing, her small chest rising and falling, under the ratty old blanket you've been sharing since harvest. You hang the lizard above the bed. It sways slightly in the draught from the chimney, its dried tail curved like a question mark. You stare at it for a long time, then lie down beside the fire and try to believe it's doing something. Anything. Here's the thing, you want to believe, not because you're superstitious, Not because you think Elswith is a witch or an angel or some forest spirit in human skin, but because sometimes belief is the only thing you have. When your sister's skin is burning, when the village well smells wrong, when the sky doesn't clear for 7 days straight, you need something to believe in. And maybe that something is a dried lizard, and maybe it's just hot water and herbs. You don't know, but your sister is breathing. You fall asleep with her hand in yours and a new thought worming its way through your brain. Maybe the best doctors aren't the ones in black masks with sticks. Maybe they're the ones who show up, smell weird, slap your hand, and save your sister anyway. You find the book in the ashes. It's not a whole book, just a chunk of one, barely held together by a crumbling leather binding and a rusted buckle that sticks when you try to open it. Half the pages are charred, the rest damp and curled at the edges. You found it behind the church, in the spot where the old cook used to dump kitchen scraps, now just a sunken pile of grey and bone. You weren't looking for treasure, just chasing the pig who'd made a break for it again, when your foot hit something soft and unnatural in the muck. You dragged it out, wiped the sludge off the cover, and sat there holding it like it might bite. Because here's the thing, you can't read. Not really. You know your letters, sort of, thanks to a travelling friar who once swapped you a crust of sweetbread for sitting through his makeshift lesson about the holy alphabet. You know A is for Adam, and B is for Bible, and C is usually followed by punishment. But you can't read full words. You definitely can't read this. Dense lines of ink, symbols that loop and swirl like vines. Latin, probably. Or maybe you have just bad handwriting. Still, you hide the book under your tunic and take it home. Your historical fact for today? Illiteracy was the norm for most of Tudor England. For peasants like you, reading was a luxury, about as useful as a second pair of shoes and far less likely to keep you warm. The only people who could reliably read were clergy, nobles, merchants, and the occasional lucky apprentice. Some village children picked up basic letters if they were sent to grammar schools, but those were few, far between, and almost exclusively for boys. Girls, forget it. Unless you were born into wealth or religious life, your education topped out at don't set the firewood on fire. And now, the fringe fact. People were sometimes punished for reading the wrong things. Once the printing press arrived and Bibles began circulating in English, all sorts of dangerous ideas began sneaking into the lower classes. People started reading for themselves. This terrified the church and the crown equally. Owning an unauthorized Bible could get you fined, flogged, or even burned. Literally burned. With fire. Scholars argue about how widespread these punishments were. Some say the paranoia was overblown, mostly affecting radicals and heretics. Others believe that even small acts of reading, private prayer books, illicit pamphlets, were risky enough to make villagers hide them in thatched roofs or bury them under pig pens. You hide yours under the straw mattress. You don't tell your parents. Your father would just shrug and toss it into the fire. Your mother might worry. She's the kind of woman who puts rosemary under the threshold just in case, and a book you can't read smells like trouble even before it's opened. But you can't help yourself. You sneak it out at night after your sister's asleep and your father's snoring and the pig has stopped trying to eat the hearth. You sit near the glowing coals and flip through the pages slowly, carefully, like they might crumble into ash at any second. You run your finger along the letters, tracing their shapes, mouthing them out loud in the silence. Some are familiar, most aren't, but it feels like magic. Not the broomstick kind, not spells or curses, or talking frogs, but real magic. Like someone pressed their thoughts into these pages and sent them forward through time, right to you. You don't know what they're saying, but the fact that they're saying something, that's enough. That's power. You get bold. You start copying letters onto scraps of bark and bits of cloth. You listen harder during church, trying to match sounds to shapes. You even ask the Reeve's son if he knows what miserere means, pretending it came from a prayer you heard. He calls you stupid and throws a pebble at your head, but later you hear him whisper the word to himself like he's trying it out. The more you stare at the book, the more you start to wonder, who wrote this? Why was it in the ashes? What was so dangerous about a bunch of ink and paper that someone had to burn it in secret? One night you open the middle page and find a drawing. Just a rough sketch, but unmistakable. A face, worn, bearded, eyes closed like he's dreaming. There's a hand above him, fingers outstretched. You think it's meant to be God, or maybe a king. Underneath is one word, resurgam. You whisper it, re-sur. It feels like pulling a stone from the earth with your tongue. The next day, you walk past the church and glance at the carving above the door. There it is again, resurgam. You never noticed it before. You start noticing a lot of things. The letters on the grain sacks, the symbols carved into the blacksmith's tools, the tiny scratches the steward makes in his ledger. Reading is everywhere. You just never had the key. Now you're trying to make one. Here's another historical fact for your growing brain. Reading was power in Tudor England, and dangerous power at that. Those who could read controlled money, land, law and faith. Those who couldn't just hoped they weren't being lied to. Want to keep someone obedient? Don't teach them how to read the law that punishes them. Want to control a village? Control who reads the prayers? You go back to the book night after night. Your lips stumble over the sounds. Your fingers grow stained from soot and ash and ink you tried to make by mixing charcoal with ale. It's slow, maddening, but also alive. One night your mother catches you. You're hunched near the fire, whispering over a torn page when she sits up from her straw bed and says your name, not angry, just tired. She sees the book. You freeze. She walks over slowly, kneels beside you, and looks at the page. Her finger hovers above the text. Domine, she says. Her voice is flat but certain. It means Lord. You blink at her. I used to serve at the manor, she says quietly. Before your sister, before your father. Learned a little from the priest's daughter. Not much, just enough to understand when people were talking over me. You don't know what to say. She closes the book, doesn't scold, doesn't smile. Hide it better, she says. Then she walks back to bed. That night you don't read. You just lie there in the dark, the book tucked under your blanket, and stare at the ceiling. Your mind hums with shapes and shadows, and the growing sense that this might be how you escape. Not from the village or the mud or the pig, but from the cage inside your own head. You whisper the word again. Resurgam. I shall rise again. The hunger comes back before the sun does. You wake up with that hollow ache in your stomach, the kind that feels like it's gnawing from the inside out. It's not just you. Your sister looks paler than usual, curled up in a ball beside the hearth with her knees pressed into her chest. Your mother's quieter too, not even humming while she stirs the pot. And the pot itself, well, it's mostly water these days. Water and one shriveled onion that's been boiled so many times it no longer knows what flavour is. Your father's already gone, off at dawn to beg or bargain with the steward for a sack of barley, or maybe a broken wheel he can repair for scraps. Anything to keep food on the table, or at least in the general vicinity of it. You sit up and stretch, every joint creaking like it's made of firewood. Your clothes hang off you now, not because they've grown, but because you've shrunk. Slowly, quietly. The way Tudor people do when the harvest fails and winter laughs in your face. You look over at the pig who's watching you warily, like it knows it might be on the menu soon. Let's pause for your historical fact before your stomach growls loud enough to wake the dead. Tudor England was no stranger to hunger. Famines weren't just possible, they were expected. A few weeks of bad weather, a blight in the wheat, too much rain at harvest, and suddenly the village was living on acorn soup and hope. Bread shortages could lead to riots. And don't even get people started on meat. Most peasants were lucky to see it a few times a year, on feast days, if someone generous died. And now, your fringe fact, scurvy was a common and miserable companion. We now know it's caused by a lack of vitamin C, but back then no one had a clue. People just noticed that your gums rotted, your teeth fell out, your legs swelled up, and then you died in a puddle of yourself. It mostly plagued sailors, but even inland, the poor often went without fresh greens for months. The best prevention, dandelions, nettles, sorrel, bitter, leafy weeds that no one wanted, until they were the only thing standing between you and the grave. The scholarly debate around Tudor nutrition is oddly intense. Some claim the average peasant diet, while limited, was actually healthier than today's processed junk. Whole grains, seasonal veggies, small portions, low sugar. Others argue that chronic malnutrition, poor sanitation, and lack of variety made long-term health almost impossible. Either way, you're not thriving, you're surviving. And today, that means foraging. Your mother sends you and your cousin toward the woods, with strict instructions. No mushrooms you don't recognise, no berries unless they're black, and don't come back without something edible. That's the Tudor parenting style. Loving, but rooted in consequences. The walk is long, the ground still soft and slimy from last week's thaw. You carry a wicker basket patched with twine and hope. Your cousin walks beside you, pointing out rabbit tracks like he's a seasoned hunter, even though the last thing he caught was his own foot in a snare he forgot to mark. You find some nettles, good ones, thick and green, just starting to poke through the mulch at the edge of the tree line. You grab them with your tunic to avoid the sting, snapping the tops off like your mother taught you. You find some wild garlic too, hiding near a fallen log. Your cousin spots an old bird's nest and climbs the tree, just in case. No eggs, just feathers and disappointment. And then you hit the jackpot, a patch of sorrel, sour, tangy, and blessedly fresh. You both kneel down and start yanking it by the handful, dirt and all, stuffing it into the basket like you have just struck gold. You chew a piece while you work. It's not sweet, not filling, but it's real. Something alive, something green. You imagine soup, bread, a stew with real chunks. You imagine the table full again, your mother smiling, your sister with a mouthful of something other than coffin air. And then your cousin freezes. You look up to see him crouched, wide-eyed, staring toward the path. There's someone there, a man, alone, limping. Tall, thin, wrapped in a dark cloak that doesn't quite reach his boots. You can't see his face, but there's something wrong. Not wounded, not sick, just off. He stops, turns his head slightly, and you swear he looks straight at you. You duck behind the log, heart pounding. Your cousin grabs your arm. Let's go. You don't argue. You bolt through the trees, basket thumping against your side, nettles stinging through your tunic, feet slipping in the muck. You don't stop until you're back at the edge of the village, panting, hands scraped, breath white in the air. Your cousin says nothing, just drops the basket on your doorstep and runs home. Your mother asks what happened. You say you saw a fox. She doesn't believe you, but she doesn't ask again. That night you eat soup. Real soup with greens and herbs and even a chunk of barley your father managed to trade from the steward. It's thin, but it's warm, and it fills your belly enough that you lie down with something other than ache in your gut. As you drift off, your sister mumbles in her sleep something about apples. Your mother hums. Your father sits by the fire, sharpening a blade that's more rust than edge. You think about the man in the woods, who he was, what he was doing, why he looked like the shape of something you've been warned about but never named. And you think about hunger. Not just in your stomach, but in the way people look when they've gone too long without something they can't quite name. Food, warmth, love, knowledge, safety, any of it. You close your eyes and whisper the word you've been practicing in secret, traced from your hidden book and now buried in your heart like a seed. Resurgam, still hungry, but still here. It rains all day, the kind of relentless sideways rain that doesn't fall so much as crawl down from the sky and soak everything it touches. The sort of rain that turns roads into rivers and cottages into dripping, miserable shoeboxes. You wake to the sound of it hammering the thatched roof, don't you? A steady drumbeat broken only by the occasional plop of a leak landing in the bucket near your bed. You roll over and stare at the ceiling, watching it sag slightly between the beams with each fresh downpour. Your father's already up, of course. He's outside patching the roof with clumps of moss, yelling at the pig to get off the firewood pile. Your mother's inside, scraping the mould off yesterday's bread with the edge of a spoon. Your sister is curled against the wall, face half hidden, beneath a blanket that used to be blue, and now looks like something pulled from the bottom of a lake. Rain means everything slows down. You can't farm, can't forage, can't travel. You just sit inside, stewing in your own dampness. The wall's dark with water stains and the floor turning to mush underfoot. And there's nothing to do, which is somehow worse. No chores, no distractions, just the dull throb of waiting. After an hour of watching the pig chew its own leg hair, you wander over to the fire and begin rearranging wet twigs into a more hopeless shape. Your sister asks if you think God's forgotten about your village. You say no, but quietly, because you're not sure either. Time for your historical fact of the day. Tudor England had no concept of weatherproofing. Thatched roofs leaked. Walls made from wattle and daub, basically mud and sticks, cracked. Floors turned into puddles. Most cottages didn't have chimneys, just a hole in the roof, and that meant rain came in right through the centre of your living space. If you were rich, you had stone walls and fireplaces. If you were poor, you had rot and mildew. And the fringe fact? Mould was so common that people didn't bother fighting it. Clothes were often damp year-round, bedding was hung by the fire daily to dry, though that usually just meant steaming gently until it smelled like a wet dog. There were even folk remedies involving moss or fungus being used as wound dressings, because when everything around you is growing something, you start to think maybe it's useful. Scholars still argue over how bad the indoor conditions were. Some insist Tudor homes were healthier than we assume, especially in rural areas with open airflow and natural materials. Others point to the rampant lung infections, chronic coughs, and general stench of everything as evidence that living indoors was only marginally better than sleeping in a ditch. You wouldn't know how to weigh in on that debate. All you know is that your feet haven't been dry in 4 days, and your hair smells like soup. And around midday, your father returns from the roof with moss in his eyebrows and defeat on his face. "It'll hold," he says, for now. You all pretend to believe him. Lunch is more soup, same soup as last night, same soup as yesterday. A bit of onion, a scrap of stale bread, and a handful of wilted greens your mother refuses to identify. The good news, the bowl's warm. The bad news, you can see your reflection in it, and you look like you've been lost in a bog for a month. By early afternoon, the house is filled with the unmistakable scent of wet livestock and boredom. So you do the only thing that makes sense. You pull out the book. You do it slowly, carefully, glancing over your shoulder, even though your mother already knows. She doesn't stop you, just eyes the ceiling and mutters something about praying it doesn't fall in. You sit by the fire and crack open the binding. The pages are still damp at the corners, but the ink holds. You sound out words under your breath, matching them to the little list you've started keeping in your head. Domini, Pax, Corpus, you think you know what Eternam means. Maybe. Your sister crawls over and watches you, fascinated. "What does it say?" You shrug. "I don't know, but I think it means something about peace." She nods. "We could use that." Later, while the rain pounds harder and the walls start leaking in places they shouldn't, your cousin bursts through the door, soaked, wide-eyed, panting. "They're coming," he says. "The taxmen." Your father groans. Here's the Tudor fact you didn't want but definitely need. Taxes were brutal in Tudor England, and inconsistent. One year it might be grain, the next livestock. Sometimes it was coin, which was worst of all because no one you know has coin. The crown needed money, for war, for palaces, for Elizabeth's latest imported wig, and they squeezed it from the countryside with ruthless regularity. Refuse to pay, say goodbye to your tools or your goat. Or, if things got especially tense, your freedom. The fringe fact? Some villagers would hide their young men to avoid conscription and taxes. Pretend someone was sick, or dead, or gone. One year, a family in a neighbouring town reportedly buried their son up to his neck in the garden and covered him in hay just to keep him from being dragged off to pay a debt in labour. When the reeve asked where he'd gone, they pointed at a goat and claimed divine punishment had turned him into livestock. It worked. Once. Your father doesn't bother hiding. He just mutters a curse and pulls out a sack of grain from the corner, his last decent payment, and waits. When the taxmen arrive, they're drenched but smug, cloaks dripping, boots tracking filth into the house without apology. They speak with accents that aren't local. Big city men. London, probably. They list names. Your father nods. Grain is handed over. A ledger is marked. One of them eyes your sister. She coughs and glares at him, and he looks away. They leave without incident. But your home is lighter now, literally. And your father's shoulders look heavier than ever. The rain doesn't stop. That night you lie awake listening to the drip, drip, drip of a leak right above your head. You shift slightly to the left and curl into a ball, trying to ignore the damp spreading across your blanket. The pig snores. Your sister mumbles in her sleep, and your stomach growls with a hunger that isn't just about food. You pull the book close and whisper one last word from its pages. Lux. Light. Just a little. You wake to shouting. It's not the usual morning squabble over who left the door unlatched or why the pig chewed through the broom again. No, this is different. Louder, urgent, and male voices, several of them, barking orders in that tone people use when they have swords and the legal right to use them. You scramble upright, heart already in your throat, straw sticking to your cheek. Your sister sits up too, bleary-eyed. Your mother grabs her by the shoulder and pulls her close without a word. Outside, boots stomp across the muddy lane. Someone screams, something crashes. A chicken flies past the window, fast, flapping, feathers everywhere. You glance at your father. He's already halfway to the back corner, pulling up a loose floorboard. Not the one with the book, that's your hiding place. This one's older. You've never seen it opened. Beneath it, a small axe, a pouch of something heavy, and a folded piece of cloth so stained it could be a rag or a relic. He doesn't grab any of it. Just stares for a moment like he's checking that it's all still there. Then he closes the board and stands up, straightening his back. "They're taking people," he mutters. Your mother's lips press into a line. "What for this time?" Confession, or suspicion, or neither. You know what this is. Everyone does. been whispered about for weeks. Someone up the road made a joke about the Queen, another wore a cross that looked too Catholic. A boy said the word Luther like it was a swear and then vanished by morning. You don't need to be guilty of anything in Tudor England, you just need to be inconvenient. Let's go ahead and drop your historical fact. Tudor justice was not what you'd call fair or consistent. Trials, if you got one, often operated on confession, hearsay or torture-induced babbling. Being poor didn't help. Being educated sometimes made it worse. If you were caught reading the wrong thing, saying the wrong thing, or even looking the wrong way at someone with a badge, you could be accused of treason, heresy or witchcraft. Take your pick, and your fringe fact. Confession obtained through torture was legally acceptable. That's not even the worst part. You could be tortured before your trial to encourage cooperation. Methods varied, from the rack, classic, to thumbscrews, unpleasant, to something called the scavenger's daughter, which basically folded your body like an origami goose until your nose bled from your knees. There's debate, of course. Some scholars argue that actual torture was relatively rare outside of political cases. Others point to parish records and private letters as proof that it was more widespread than anyone wanted to admit. Either way, in your village, it's enough to make people sleep with knives under their beds and secrets sewn into their clothes. Your father opens the door. Rain's still falling, but softer now. More mist than downpour. In the lane, two men in official cloaks, one with the scroll, the other with a cudgel, are standing outside your neighbour's house. You watch as old Mr. Weldon, the one with no teeth and a fondness for suspicious rhymes, is dragged out by his arms. He shouts about his innocence, about how he's never read a thing in his life, which is probably true. They ignore him. He's not the only one. 3 more men are taken. 1 woman, a boy barely older than you who once helped you catch a runaway goose. He's barefoot and crying. His mother begs. No one listens. Your father steps outside, not far, just to the edge of the step. The officials glance his way. One lifts his chin in a nod that means, don't get clever. Your father nods back. That's it. That's the whole exchange. The men move on. You all exhale like you've been holding it for years. Later, when the shouting fades and the lane quiets, your father says, it's not about guilt, it's about fear. They want us quiet, looking down. You think of your book hidden under the mattress, of the Latin words you've traced into bits of bark, of your sister, still weak but watching, always watching, with eyes too big for her face. They'll come back, your mother says. Of course they will, your father replies. And they do. The next time it's not men in cloaks, it's someone closer, the reeve, a neighbour, a cousin, people who know your name and where you sleep. This is how it works now. Tudor justice isn't just about force, it's about pressure. They want you to accuse each other, point fingers, keep the fear alive. You hear that someone claimed the blacksmith was forging rebel symbols on horseshoes, that the miller's wife prays in Latin, that the baker keeps a copy of a banned psalm hidden in her flour sack. None of it's true. Probably. You're learning fast, it doesn't matter. Your cousin tells you, in a voice too low to be casual, that the steward asked about your father, asked whether he's been attending official services, asked if he ever shares ideas, asked if he owns anything written. You feel your stomach drop. That night, you pull the book from under the mattress and stare at it. The cracked leather, the singed edges, the weight of it, not just in your hands, but in the danger it carries. You don't sleep much. At dawn, your father finds you sitting by the fire, book in your lap, eyes red. Want to get rid of it? He asks. You shake your head. Then you'll need to get smarter. He crouches, pokes at the embers, and says something you never expected to hear. I can't read, he mutters. But your mother? She used to, and you blink. She taught me a prayer once, he adds. 1 word at a time. Said if I ever couldn't speak, I could still show the words. He glances at you. You do the same. That's the lesson. No grand speech, no be careful or you're special. Just that. Later you sew a false seam into your tunic. The book gets split. 2 pages at a time, slipped into places no one will check, behind the pig's trough, inside the heel of your boot, under a loose stone near the well. You copy words onto scraps of cloth and bake them into loaves. You trace letters in dirt and wipe them away before the wind can. You get smarter, you stay quiet, but you keep reading. Because now you know justice isn't about truth. Not here, not now, and silence won't save you forever. The trumpet blows at dawn, 1 long, low, miserable note that slices through the mist like a knife through old bread. You hear it from your bed. If you can call a pile of straw and damp wool a bed, and your gut sinks before your eyes even open, that sound only means one thing: the levy has begun. You sit up slow and stiff the way you've seen old dogs move when their bones no longer trust the day. Your father's already standing at the doorway, looking out across the lane. No words, just that posture, shoulders tight, jaw clenched. Your sister peeks out from beneath the blanket, coughs twice and curls deeper into the folds. The levy doesn't always come here. Your village is small, half forgotten, tucked between bog and forest like a secret the king hasn't remembered to punish yet. But sometimes they remember, sometimes the crown needs men, or boys. Or warm bodies that can hold a sword and catch an arrow with their face. You throw on your tunic, say nothing, and follow your father outside. There's already a crowd gathering by the chapel. Not a crowd, really, just every able-bodied male between 13 and 50. The levy man rides in on a fine horse, polished armour, gleaming in the fog like it knows it doesn't belong here. Behind him, 2 foot soldiers with halberds and faces like pickled onions stand guard over a cart. Inside are bundles of cheap cloth, mismatched boots, and weapons that look more like farming tools. Nothing fancy, nothing new, just gear that says you're not expected to come back with this. The levy man reads off names, one by one. Some answer, some don't. A few lie and say the person's dead, or moved, or was just taken by the sickness. The levy man writes something down anyway. Then he looks around, says they're still short. This is when things get unpleasant. Let's hit the historical fact now before the kicking begins. Tudor levies were local military drafts, usually ordered by the crown when soldiers were needed for campaigns, rebellions, or defending the realm. Every village was expected to provide a certain number of men, and if you didn't volunteer, they'd take you anyway. You didn't train, you didn't get armour. You got a spear and a blessing, maybe. And here's the lovely fringe fact. Sometimes conscripts were chained together, especially if they looked nervous or untrustworthy. This didn't just keep them from running off, it made transporting them easier. In one record, a levy from Norfolk saw 9 men march 70 miles chained wrist to wrist, sleeping in barns and fields fed once a day. Only 6 arrived. No one asked what happened to the others. Your father steps forward, not because his name is called, but because he knows it's coming. His name is never on the list, but it always floats nearby like smoke. He doesn't say anything, just crosses his arms and waits. The levy man looks at him, nods, then turns to the crowd. "Who else?" he says. Nobody answers, so they start picking. Your cousin, the one with the lopsided grin and a scar from falling into the thatching cart, gets pointed at. He opens his mouth to protest and then closes it again when the halberd twitches in his direction. You try to disappear, it doesn't work. "Boy," the levy man says, eyes locking on yours. "How old?" You open your mouth. 11. You're not, you're 14. But you say it like you believe it. Your father backs you up. "Still a child," he mutters. "Still wetting the bed." A few people chuckle. It's forced, but it's enough. The levy man frowns. He has other villages to get through, other carts to fill. He can't be bothered to argue with pigs and thatch dwellers. He waves you off. You exhale so hard you nearly collapse. 2 more boys are taken instead. Twins from the edge of the village. Their mother screams. One tries to run. A guard grabs him by the tunic and smacks him with the flat of the halberd. Hard. Not enough to kill, just enough to warn. By midday the cart is full. The levy man gives a speech none of you listen to. Hands out 2 copper coins to each family for your service to the realm, and rides off like he's just done something noble. The cart rolls away. Your cousin looks back once, you wave, he doesn't. Later you ask your father what happens next. "They'll walk," he says, "to London or wherever the fight is." "What if there's no fight?" "There's always a fight," he replies. Time for your scholarly debate. Were these levies useful, or just a way to make the poor feel disposable? Some historians argue they helped maintain a ready supply of troops and gave peasants a chance, however slim, to rise in rank. Others say it was just a form of state-sanctioned population control. Send the poor off to die, clear out the land, and call it patriotism. You don't know much about politics, but you do know this: when the levy comes, nobody smiles, nobody sings, and nobody ever comes back better than they left. That evening your mother makes stew, thin, bitter, and rushed. No one talks. Your sister pokes her food with a spoon, but doesn't eat much. You think of your cousin, already tired, already bruised, already vanishing into the fog with a spear that probably has more rust than blade. You step outside after dinner and climb the hill near the pasture. The fog is lifting and the moon is rising, cold and bright and too clean for this world. You sit on a stone and pull a page from your tunic, one you copied yesterday, one you can almost read now. Fiat voluntas tua. Let your will be done. You're not sure who you're saying it to, but you say it anyway. By the time midsummer rolls around, the world has started pretending to be beautiful again. The sun shows up earlier, slanting through the thatched holes in your roof like it's got somewhere better to be. The mud dries into cracked lines across the road. Flies swarm anything that doesn't move for 30 seconds. And everything smells faintly of warm manure and blossoms, which is either refreshing or revolting depending on where you stand. Your sister's stronger now. She even walks to the well on her own again, though your mother insists someone follows her, just in case the sickness has ideas. Your father is back in the fields, bent double over rows of barley that may or may not yield more than 3 mice and a sad loaf. You're mostly in charge of the pig now, who has entered what can only be described as his feral teenage years. He bit your ankle last week and then stared at you like you were the problem. So yes, life goes on, but not everyone is here to see it. Your cousin's name hasn't been spoken aloud since he was taken with the levy. You overheard your aunt say his boots were returned in a sack with a wax seal and no explanation. He died with honour, the steward claimed, which you now know translates to, we lost track of the body, but the paperwork made it home. At night, your village quiets early. No more singing from the alehouse, no loud prayers. People have learned to keep their heads down and their mouths shut. Even the Reeves' dog barks softer now. You still read. Every night near the fire, when the pig settles in like a breathing footstool and your sister is asleep with her hand curled around your arm, you take out a page. Just one. You whisper the words slowly, like they might shatter if you say them too fast. Your mother doesn't stop you. Sometimes you think she listens, sometimes you know she does. But tonight is different. Tonight there's shouting. Again. Not from the levy. Not from tax collectors. This is something else. Closer, more furious. Like a fight broke out and someone remembered they still have fists. You step outside and see it. 2 men wrestling near the chapel. One's a merchant's son, back from London, and drunk on either ale or righteousness. The other is the blacksmith's apprentice. Quiet, honest, strong as boiled beef and now covered in blood. They were shouting about the Queen, not praying for her, not praising her, mocking her. Someone gasps, someone runs. The steward's men arrive, too fast, too ready. The blacksmith's boy is grabbed first. He doesn't fight, just says, I didn't say anything. The merchant's son vanishes into the fog. Rich boys have a talent for that. You stand frozen, then you see the scroll. One of the steward's men drops it. Parchment smeared with ink, trampled by boots. You recognize it immediately. Latin. The same kind of script that fills your secret pages. The same symbols, same loops, same dangerous shape. You step forward, fast, scoop it up, tuck it into your tunic before anyone sees. You shouldn't have done that, but it's too late now. Back home, you unfold the scroll and read what you can. It's not a prayer, it's a pamphlet. A handwritten copy of something forbidden. A protest. Maybe from the city, maybe older. You recognize a phrase, Veritas vos liberabit. The truth will set you free. You stare at it for a long time, then carefully you burn it. Not out of fear, out of caution. You already have too many secrets. Here's your historical fact before the tension breaks your teeth. Pamphlets were one of the most powerful weapons of the Tudor underground. After the printing press spread across Europe, it became easier to copy short messages, political protests, religious manifestos, philosophical rants. And because they were small and quick to distribute, pamphlets became a favourite tool of rebels, heretics, and anyone else with an opinion and a bone to pick. And your fringe fact? Many of these pamphlets were copied by hand, not printed. In rural areas where printing presses weren't accessible, or weren't trusted, scribes and educated sympathisers would transcribe entire texts by candlelight. These copies passed from hand to hand, folded into sleeves, sewn into cloaks, hidden in the lining of boots. You wonder now, who made this one? How did it get here? Who gave it to the blacksmith's boy, and what will happen to him? You hear the answer the next day. He's been taken to the manor, not the usual holding cell, the dungeon, which in this case is a glorified root cellar with one small window and an iron ring bolted to the floor. They say he confessed, or they say he didn't. Depends on who you ask, but the result is the same. The hanging is scheduled for Sunday. Public required. The entire village is expected to attend, not to mourn, to witness. You've never seen someone hang, only heard stories. Some say it's quick, others say not. Some say it's painless. Others say the worst part is the silence afterward. Your sister asks if she has to go, your mother tells her no. Your father says nothing. You, though, you'll go, not because you want to, but because you have to see. You've read the words, you've whispered them, you've copied them, folded them, hidden them in places where even the pig won't sniff. You need to know what happens when words get caught. Sunday arrives with sun. Oh, too bright, too warm, the kind of day made for weddings or maypoles, not death. The gallows are simple, a frame, a rope, a stool. The blacksmith's boy stands there, hands bound, face bruised, but not crying, not begging. He looks out at the crowd like he's memorising us. You realise this is the price. The steward reads a proclamation. For treason against Her Majesty, for possession of unapproved texts, for spreading words not sanctioned by the Crown. Words. That's what did it. They kick the stool. It doesn't go quickly. And afterward, no one speaks. Not for hours. Not even the steward. The pig doesn't squeal. C'est pas ce. The birds don't chirp. The wind doesn't dare blow. That night you read again. Same page. Over and over. Veritas vos liberabit. You don't know if it's true. But you say it anyway. There's something about the quiet after a hanging that doesn't wash away with the rain. You try. Everyone tries. Life picks back up the next morning like it's contractually obligated. The baker is back at his stall, slapping loaves onto the counter like they're not half air and quarter ash. The reeve strolls the lane in his oversized boots, twirling a stick and pretending he's not terrified. Even the steward's dog is back to barking at shadows again. But the silence hasn't gone. It's soaked into the walls, into the straw, into your bones. You feel it most when you pass the gallows. They didn't bother taking it down, just left the wooden frame standing, roped cleaned, stool reset, waiting, ready, like a throat cleared or a threat that doesn't need repeating. You try not to look, but your eyes find it every time. That afternoon you go to the well, not because you're thirsty, but because the path there takes you far from people. The trees buzz with summer flies. The grass whispers against your legs. The sky is too blue. It feels wrong to be alive on a day like this, like you're flaunting something you didn't earn. The bucket squeaks down the rope. You lean on the stone rim and close your eyes. You think about the blacksmith's boy, the way he stood, the way he looked out at everyone and said nothing. You wonder if he was afraid. You wonder if he would have read your book. Because it's still hidden, tucked beneath the floorboards, buried in seams and shoe heels in your own careful memory. But it's heavier now. Every word, every page, every little curl of Latin ink. Before, reading was quiet rebellion. A secret joy. A flicker of light you could carry through the dark. Now it feels like holding fire in your hands. Let's pause here for your final historical fact. Tudor England punished knowledge when it didn't serve power. Books were banned. Schools were tools. Language was weaponized. A villager caught with an unauthorized Bible could be fined, imprisoned, even executed. The ruling class feared not just rebellion of arms, but rebellion of thought. Words were dangerous, ideas were treason. And your fringe fact? Some people memorized entire books to keep them alive. Whole psalms, whole treatises, even banned poems, whispered from mouth to mouth, passed down like family recipes. So when a book was burned or a scribe was arrested, the knowledge lived on, in minds, not pages. You wonder if you could do that, if you had to. Back at the cottage, your sister is playing with the pig again, who has decided to chew the corner of a stool into what can only be described as pig art. Your mother is cutting nettles for soup. Your father is watching the horizon like it owes him something. You slip behind the house, under the eaves, where the sun never fully dries the ground. You pull up the stone, the one you placed weeks ago, the one with a hollow underneath. The book is still there. You hold it in your hands. It's worn now, pages curled, spine warped from heat and breath and time, but it's still legible, still alive. You think of the boy. You think of the steward's words, for possession of unapproved texts. You think of resurgam. You flip to a random page. Your lips move silently. You try to memorize it, line by line. Then you close the book, wrap it in cloth and return it to the hole. That night you don't sleep, not because of hunger or cold or the pig snoring louder than a thunderstorm, but because your mind won't stop spinning. You can't stop thinking about how fragile everything is: life, safety, truth. You decide it's time to do something. At sunrise, you walk to the chapel. It's empty, cold, the air smells of wax and stone and secrets. You kneel at the altar and light a candle. You don't pray. You just whisper a single sentence: "Let me keep the words." And then, before your courage runs out, you take a sliver of parchment from your pocket, copied last night, in your best handwriting, and slide it under the cracked floorboard near the altar, the same spot where the old priest once buried a relic. You're not trying to be a martyr. You're not planning a revolution. But someone, someday, might find it, and when they do, they'll know someone tried. You walk back home with mud on your knees and fire in your chest. Your mother eyes you and says nothing. Your father raises an eyebrow. You just sit by the fire, stare into the coals, and begin whispering again. Veritas vos liberabit. The truth will set you free, and if it doesn't, at least it keeps the fire burning. Wind, then. So, and that's it. That nice. You made it to the end. Somehow you survived Tudor England. Barely. Soaked, slightly starved, possibly with lice, and definitely wiser than when you started. Sure, you lost a cousin, half a pig, and maybe a little faith in humanity. But you gained something else, didn't you? A glimpse of the past where nothing came easy, where reading could kill you, and dinner might have been boiled nettles if you were lucky. But also a past where people still dreamed, still hoped, still tried to pass on something better, even if it was just a word or a book or a little scrap of meaning scratched into bark. So maybe you lie back now, in your own bed, in your own time, with clean sheets and central heating and no risk of the local lord conscripting you before breakfast. Maybe you breathe deep, and maybe you sleep a little easier tonight knowing just how far we've come, and how much some people gave to get us here. Thanks for walking through the mud with me.